In an immense empire, there was a young family with a small daughter named Lilith. Her father, Enoch Rubinstein, every time he held her in his arms, saw a little angel in her. As soon as she was born, he noticed she was identical to him, like 2 drops of water. Her attractiveness was undeniable, but Enoch doubted if she would recognize him as her father. She is his blood and his flesh, and he offers her an unforgettable love. But at the same time, he felt strange, as if something was tearing him apart inside. As for most aristocrats in the empire, his daughter was conceived to perpetuate the family lineage. That's why Enoch believed he wouldn't feel anything. But this creature carries his blood, and when she grows up, she will become a great person. An aristocrat, but she could also become a pawn of the empire, and looking at that sweet childish face, Enoch decided he would not allow it. One night, finally decided to act. He took the baby in his arms and snuck out of the castle. The girl looked at him with her huge blue eyes and smiled, as she still didn't understand anything. But Enoch already had a plan prepared, and before leaving, he tenderly kissed his daughter's rosy cheeks. Upon leaving the main building, which looked like a battlefield, the father hugged Lilith. And he was ready to change destiny. He couldn't allow his daughter to live the same horrible life on the battlefields that he had. After taking a few steps, Enoch heard the voice of his wife, Selena, who thought he was fleeing. The man stopped, but said nothing, and she noticed the baby in his arms and became extremely indignant. Then she started scolding him, telling him he couldn't do that and take his daughter with him. Enoch then explained that he didn't want the same upbringing for her that he had and wanted to move on. But Selena declared that she was also her daughter, so he shouldn't dare snatch her away from her mother like that. Turning back to his wife, Enoch proposed fleeing together, but the woman just laughed. His words sounded completely absurd to her, and she noticed he was more impulsive than he appeared. Besides, they are free people because they were born nobles of the empire, and it makes no sense to flee anywhere. But the main thing is that they are obliged to live and die for the empire. The same applies to their daughter. Although Selena understood his feelings, as she also thought a lot about their daughter's fate. Enoch clenched his teeth in anger, ready at that moment to do anything to save his little one. Suddenly, Selena simply asked him to leave. Then she turned and walked in the opposite direction. And before she left, Enoch confessed that he planned to go to Zenon. He intended to find a person there. Finally, Selena wished him luck. After which, the man holding the baby embarked on a long journey. That day, the Empire's only sacred sword, Enoch Rubinstein, disappeared. And 7 years passed since that day. The following events took place in a village, in a small house. The girl Lilith had already grown up and was always with her dad, who one more day came to wake her up for breakfast. But she didn't want to get up, and with her eyes closed, she begged him to let her dream 5 more minutes. Her father insisted. He had a sweet appearance and affectionate hands. His name was James Brown. Convincing Lilith to wake up, he confessed that he had prepared a princess breakfast for her. Sausage with French fries. Even with her eyes half closed, the little one sniffed and also smelled broccoli, hidden behind the egg. Making a face, the girl remembered that she didn't like it. But James insisted it was necessary, and for dessert, he promised almond cookies and chocolate with apple jam. Lilith, although small, understood that her dad was using a trick and trying to convince her to eat broccoli with a sweet treat. But she didn't consider herself someone who would fall for that trap and demanded 2 cookies. Dad, happy that his daughter was getting vitamins, kissed her cheek. In addition to all this, the 7-year-old girl, apart from her routine, remembered her past life. Although she was a child like any other, and lived with a 9th-rank bachelor, her father. And no matter what, Lilith thought they lived happy and peaceful days. Memories of her past life surfaced at age 3, and by 7, she remembered everything. The world she arrived in is the world of a novel she read in her previous life. In the past, she wasn't happy, as she was a graduate student and considered it unworthy. And at her blossoming age of 25, she died from overwork while writing her thesis. The thesis was about the novel The Dosa Uprising, and writing it caused her a lot of stress. That's why she was transported. Now, with these memories, her life seems distant and unreal, and she feels empathy for her past life. And at 7 years old, she already thought like an adult, although her childish aversion to broccoli was noticeable. When Dad styled her hair, he treated her like a baby, offering options. But she only asked for a ponytail. For some reason, she was shorter than the neighbor's 5-year-old boy, although her father didn't seem bothered by it. She possessed an adult mind, but she didn't want to reveal that secret and acted like a child. She asked for rabbit ears. That always melted her father, who immediately tried to kiss her pink and chubby cheeks, something she didn't like. Dad loved her anyway, and after getting her ready, he prepared to go to the market, leaving Lilith with Aunt Susan. He couldn't take her with him because a military squad of terrifying guys was lurking nearby. The girl insisted she had enough strength and wasn't scared, but James insisted, saying it was too dangerous. Those elite soldiers came to the village by order of the emperor to find capable knights. In the novel, humanity was divided into two: those who use magic and serve in battle, and those who cannot. Those who used magic had privileges and could be nobles. The empire has a system that classifies mages, but they often fight in wars, and it is not uncommon for them to die mercilessly on the battlefield as heroes. The novel did not mention the incompetent ones. Such were Lilith and her daddy, but now they were simply living their life. And even Lilith considered it a huge stroke of luck to have been born incompetent, as this world is quite strange, and she was very happy to be able to live peacefully with her father. For a moment, the girl's reflections made James pause in thought. But still, he didn't give it much importance. He was glad the little one was happy, and for him, that was the main thing. Preparing to leave, he asked Aunt Susan to look after Lilith while he was gone, and he promised to return very soon. A red-haired, bearded neighbor came to visit them, who couldn't believe such a young father had arrived in their remote village. Susan also recounted how one evening at dusk he arrived at her door, holding little Lilith in his arms. The man assured that the girl wasn't sick, but she wouldn't eat anything, even when given the bottle. She only cried. Understanding that the little one had suffered, Susan invited them into her house and then proceeded to examine her. For the girl, she prepared apple puree with milk, which she ate, and asked James to feed her. The girl was already 5 months old and clearly showed her dad, with her crying, that milk alone did not satisfy her. The next day, James thanked them for their help, and then every day he came running and tried to help somehow. Susan knew it was difficult to raise a child alone, but the young man had learned a lot. The woman's story was interrupted by a red-haired, bearded man, who exclaimed happily that this time he had won the card game. He got a straight flush and laughed with his hoarse voice, rejoicing like a small child. Then he prepared to collect all the walnuts, which were the bet, but Lilith asked him to wait, and she placed her cards. She had an imperial flush, and the bearded man would have to admit that this time he had really lost. Then Lilith was going to wash the clothes, insisting she could do it alone, when her aunt offered to do it for her. But the girl wanted to do something so that, when Dad returned, he would get a pleasant surprise. Aunt congratulated her on her diligence, but asked her at least to help carry the basket to the river. However, Lilith refused. It was Dad's clothes. Then she grabbed the basket and went with her little feet to the shore. In reality, James didn't like his daughter washing clothes in secret, but she intended to keep doing it. In her past life, she was an orphan, and this man cared for her devotedly. He was everything to her. Therefore, Lilith wanted to grow up fast to help her beloved dad in everything he needed. She loved this calm and peaceful life and wished it would never, ever end. She decided to enjoy this happiness until World Peace Day. Until then, all she had to do was be happy. She often compared this life to the previous one, and she liked this one much more. And while washing the clothes, Lilith suddenly heard the sound of hooves and then saw some riders approaching. It wasn't clear why they had come, and almost immediately one of them covered the girl with his shadow. She noticed the imperial emblem on them, so it was the Imperial Army, and these were the Blue Knights. They are second in the knight class ranking, and the one standing right over the little girl ordered her capture. Meanwhile, he looked at her squinting, as if he had found a dangerous enemy, the one he had been hunting for a long time. The girl looked at his blue cape somewhat scared, understanding that she should try to escape, but she was still very small. She wouldn't make it, and that man had already grabbed her by the neck and abruptly brought a scepter close, which immediately lit up. From the glow, the knight understood that this girl had a gift, and that she was actually the daughter of Enoch Rubinstein, although he could have told just by looking at her. And Lilith, hearing about the gift, began to suspect that something was wrong. She started struggling and demanded to be let go, declaring that she didn't know any Enoch Rubinstein. In reality, she perfectly remembered that name, but she didn't understand why it came up right now. In the novel, he was the commander of a knight order, the most powerful military force. He is a magnificent mage and swordsman, but he lost his daughter to the imperial family, and one day he took revenge. It was then that he took in and raised another male character, Jesse, who became one of the two protagonists. Now, it seemed to Lilith that everything was happening before the original events, and his daughter must probably still be alive. She didn't know how it would affect her, but she began to declare that the Blue Knight had misunderstood everything. Then she pretended her head was spinning, and that she would get a nosebleed if he didn't put her down. Doing so, he examined her black hair and blue eyes. In the novel, there was someone similar, but she couldn't remember who. The only thing clear was that she was in trouble, but she decided to make sure if they were referring to the silver-haired Duke. Lilith declared that she only resembled him in hair color and blue eyes, but her father is named James Brown and looks like her mother. The knight still holding the girl noticed that she was very intelligent. Then he called her by name, and the girl was a little disconcerted, not understanding how this guy knew her name. But then she noticed Dad James, who unexpectedly appeared in the clearing. He held a stick in his hand and began to demand explanations, and also that they release his daughter immediately. The girl worried, because talking like that to these people leads to execution, and he even threatened them with death, and immediately began to apologize to the knight, saying that her dad had simply lost his mind, and she asked him to be lenient, as he was just an imperial citizen who barely made ends meet by collecting firewood with his little daughter. The Blue Knight acted as if he hadn't heard her, and simply threw her to another knight, as if she were an object. But Lilith wasn't worried about herself. Instead, she started screaming so they wouldn't do anything to her dad. The Blue Knight dismounted and approached James Brown, while the latter continued demanding an explanation of what they wanted with his daughter. The knight called James, Enoch, and added that the emperor ordered him to return to the order immediately and fulfill his duty. But Lilith insisted that her father was not named Enoch, but James. Her words fell on deaf ears again for the knight, who reminded her that 7 years had already passed, and it was time to put an end to this, because, according to the military code, deserters must be executed immediately, and they are classified as criminals. However, the merciful emperor held Enoch in high regard for his merits and past abilities. Furthermore, no arrest warrant was issued, nor his assets confiscated. Up until now, all his illegal actions went unpunished, and they were waiting for him. Now the time has come to return. Then, the knight repeated the emperor's order. From today, Enoch must return to the order and fulfill his duty. Meanwhile, the knight stared fixedly at James, as if urging him to comply with the order. But he remained motionless, his face unperturbed. Only a subtle smile curved his lips, and he declared that the emperor's words were still bluffs, both in the past and now. Hearing this, Lilith worried even more. Her father had crossed the line by insulting the imperial family. She began to think about how to stop Dad and escape before something terrible happened, and she bit the hand of the knight who was holding her. Startled, he let go of her, and the girl fell to the ground like a small sack of potatoes. But without paying attention to the blow, she immediately got up and ran towards her beloved dad. But she didn't manage to reach her goal, because on the way she was grabbed by the neck again. Like a kitten, she was held by the captain of the knights, but she kept kicking and shouting at her father not to do anything. Then she turned to that knight and started begging forgiveness for her father's behavior. Her face looked sincere, and she begged them to spare her dad's life. She again asserted that the knight was mistaken due to her hair color. She even agreed to cooperate with them so they would be convinced of the error. Furthermore, she promised to check everything, believing that Enoch was hiding and could help find him. As long as they release her dad, James, only then will Lilith agree to go with these people. The captain of the knights thought for a second, but the girl's request did not move him. Squeezing her tightly so she couldn't escape, he aimed his sword at James. And suddenly, a magical energy enveloped him. Lilith was very scared for her father, not understanding what was happening to him, but he himself was using magic. And in an instant, the girl couldn't believe what she saw. A strange transformation. Her father was turning into someone different. His hair turned silver and his eyes blue. Lilith didn't understand anything. She always thought that the single father who raised her was James Brown. The knight holding her returned the girl to the assistant, ordering him to make sure she wasn't harmed. Lilith now understood that her dad was that powerful man these people were asking about. But the knight holding her was only following orders, and she apologized instantly, explaining that she had just found out. At that moment, a brilliant glow illuminated her, coming from the mage's magical flows. Enoch prepared to fight the captain of the knights and continued cursing the emperor, believing that he found it amusing to execute anyone who disobeyed his orders. And he was curious how the Blue Knight would force him to submit. What bothered him most was that they dared to touch his daughter, and now he was going to punish him. However, the captain of the knights had no intention of letting Rubinstein go. At that instant, his assistant placed a sword on the girl's neck and ordered Enoch to stop. He also ordered him to surrender and follow them, or his daughter would suffer. But with that, he only made an irreparable mistake. Rubinstein instantly exploded. That the so-called Order of the Holy Knights dared to threaten his little one. The captain assured that they were only following orders and had to take Enoch by any means. But he asked them to convey that he renounced that name and would no longer obey the imperial family. Even so, the knight insisted that Enoch couldn't choose now because it wasn't an offer, but an order. The captain's assistant nodded, saying that if he wanted to ensure his daughter's safety, he must surrender. The terrified girl didn't know how to help her father, but she begged them to wait and listen to her. Before this, she thought her dad, who seemed normal, was actually the hero Enoch Rubinstein. In his youth, he lost his little daughter and unleashed the blood sword in revenge. And now the moment with his daughter had arrived. Lilith longed to return to her carefree life, but now she only saw one way out, and she begged him to obey the order. She even assured the knights that her father would return to the order today, as long as they didn't harm her. They let them go, and once home, she again shouted that she was just a copy of her mom. She was still trying to understand the situation and pressed her father on why he hadn't told her anything. The man apologized, but he couldn't have told her, even if he had 10 mouths. For her safety, and he was curious how she had reacted so quickly in that situation, as this way they gained some time. Enoch believed that those fools had actually believed them and released the hostage, and now there was a chance to pack quickly and get out of there, while the knights waited outside without seeing anything. But Lilith declared that they would not flee, but would return to the capital, and her father would become a knight again. The man didn't understand why his daughter said that, and she affirmed that she wished to live with pride. She also wanted to go to the capital with her father, go to the academy, and get the talented mark. This disconcerted Enoch. He didn't understand how the girl knew about the academy and other details. She explained that she knew from her uncle, and the father became indignant, not understanding what that grumpy old man was thinking by telling such a thing to a child. Then he stared intently at his little one and begged her to listen carefully. He knew that day would come and that the horrible guys behind the door would find him. Enoch knew it, but he still fled because he didn't want his daughter to live as a gifted one. The life of an aristocrat seems like paradise, and those who use magic are treated like royalty. According to their status, they receive title and wealth. They must only be loyal and obedient. But behind that privilege, there are bonds. They must be the sword of the empire and give their lives serving the order. And on the battlefield, they are nothing more than chained dogs of the empire, living in the most horrible place. Enoch said goodbye to many comrades on the battlefield, and the very next day, he wondered who would be next. He didn't know how long he could live like this and feared for his daughter. That's why Rubinstein doesn't want Lilith's life to be like his. The day she was born and he saw her for the first time, in that very instant she became his world, and the idea that he could lose her consumed him. Saying this, he hugged his daughter tightly and tenderly. The girl understood her dad better than anyone, so she is willing to do what he wants. But if he doesn't return, this country will fall. In the original story, Enoch returned to avenge his daughter's death. Captain Cheshire meticulously planned the rebellion of the Order's knights and caused a revolution in the country. That's why, 10 years later, all the incompetent ones died due to the Emperor's order for a mass extermination. It was literally a genocide of civilians, devoid of magical powers. And only Enoch can stop it. And if they escape now, he won't take on Cheshire's main role nor rebel against the Emperor. By returning, Enoch will lose nothing. But this way, all the inhabitants like her will not die. Lilith didn't want to flee either and watch the country collapse, especially since they would have to run for the rest of their lives. Dad still didn't understand if his daughter had told him she loved the happy and carefree life. Pursing her lips slightly, the girl explained in a low voice that she had changed her mind. And remembering the talented aristocrats, she believed she too could become a powerful aristocrat. Besides, she could eat something other than pasta every day and wear dresses with bows and ribbons. The girl understood that she could use her knowledge to thwart Cheshire's plan, where many people would die. Moreover, with his return, they wouldn't have to cut wood and sell it in the store anymore, and she wouldn't have to wash. Here Dad became indignant. If he had asked her not to wash, but she kept doing it, realizing that it had slipped out. Lilith apologized, claiming she didn't want to behave like that, but she simply doesn't understand why he doesn't want her to live and take advantage of all opportunities when she wishes to live as an aristocrat, and Dad didn't even bother to ask her opinion. And she wants not only Dad to call her princess, the girl longs to be a real princess. And then, for an instant, she filled with anger and blurted out that she was not Dad's daughter, which hit him hard. Lilith declared she would be Duke Enoch's daughter, and if Dad didn't accept, she would ask the uncles herself to take her. At that moment, the man was speechless. He didn't expect such indignation from a 7-year-old girl. At the same time, he understood she was right, and swallowing a lump, he agreed to her wish. They began to prepare, and Lilith would never have thought she would leave her beloved cabin like this. Now her ordinary life in the village is over, and she was eager for what awaited her. Already in the carriage, Lilith kept thinking about it, and at one point buried her nose in her father's sleeve. He even worried if everything was all right with her, and she immediately, raising her head, asked what was outside the window. There she saw some silhouettes, and the captain explained to the Duke that they were werewolves. Rubinstein became uneasy. A pack of wolf monsters with huge jaws was approaching. It was common on the outskirts, but the knight didn't expect to see them so close and acted. Enoch couldn't wait. He decided to intervene, begging his daughter not to go out. Then he asked the captain to protect the carriage, swearing revenge if Lilith was harmed. He decided to deal with the lycanthropes alone, confident in resolving it much faster. Soon he was close to the monsters, who upon smelling human flesh wanted to have him for dinner. Meanwhile, Lilith despaired, wondering why the commander was doing nothing. He assured her that the Duke would solve it. And he was right. Enoch's sword shone with magic. Instantly, hairy heads flew off and bodies fell, spraying everything with blood. The girl opened her mouth in amazement, seeing the magic of the strongest one. Reading about it is one thing, seeing it is another. Upon returning, Enoch asked the captain why he was standing around like an idiot if he was ordered to protect the carriage. He only praised the Duke, who solved it in a second but didn't understand why he wasted mana. And Lilith, watching her father, understood that his status had increased too quickly. They arrived at the Temple of the Southern Elphasa, through whose gates they could enter the capital. The girl also changed clothes there, because you cannot enter the capital in simple clothes. Meanwhile, the knights were somewhat worried, asking if Duke Enoch was pursuing her, and she assured them everything was fine. Then they became curious about what happens when their dad gets angry, and if he had ever laid a hand on the girl. Lilith didn't understand why they asked such strange questions. They were only worried because they knew what the Duke was like. But the girl asserted that he had never hit her, nor even scolded her harshly. On the contrary, he loves her very much. Then she asked why these gentlemen considered her father so terrifying. One of them blurted out that Enoch once tore apart a bear with his bare hands. That shocked the little one. Furthermore, she learned that he was so cold that it was hard to approach him. At that instant, the commander was near the portal, and the knights asked him for confirmation about the Duke. He stopped, raising his head, and Lilith remembered that man. Now she understood why he seemed familiar. It's Action Libra. He took the commander's position when Rubinstein disappeared, and he was an important character. Not only did he possess incredible strength, he also had an irresistible appearance. The knights whispered that Enoch almost killed the commander, but the door creaking interrupted their chat. Lilith saw her father enter and immediately ran to hug him. Now he looked incredibly powerful, and even if Lilith hadn't read the novel, she would know he is the protagonist. Seeing his serious face, the girl stopped right in front of him, and Enoch leaned down to her. Then he lifted her in his arms, pretending not to recognize her. Treating her like a little angel, and with an astonished face, he declared that she was not an angel, but the very princess. He always played like that with her. Afterwards he hugged his daughter, saying that next to her, he now looked like a beggar. The commander watched all this, thinking it was too much. Then he asked them not to waste time and to leave already. But Enoch couldn't stop admiring his daughter. But it was time to leave, and the Duke, with his daughter in his arms, took a step towards the portal. On the other side, everything was different, at least for Lilith, who looked at everything with fascination. Immediately, a group of priests received them, unable to believe that the Duke had really returned. A long time had passed since their last meeting, and the head priest blessed his lordship. They also asked if the Duke planned to return home immediately, as they needed to perform the homecoming ceremony. The priests had everything ready upon learning of his possible arrival, but Enoch postponed it. The journey was long, and his daughter was exhausted. A little later, they were passing through the main street, and the girl was amazed by so many people. The knights escorted them, asking them not to get distracted and to go straight home. Lilith asked to walk, and although it was 15 minutes away, the Duke lifted her. She refused because if they carry her all the time, she will forget how to walk, but she will let him know if she gets tired. She thought she had to be alert, even if the hero no longer thought of revenge. But Lilith did something that completely prevented the original story from starting. As they walked, the girl saw how everyone knelt before the Duke. They wished him the blessing of the first goddess, and it seemed like they wouldn't stop. Although Lilith knew it would be too much, this is a land where people bow to greet each other. But this disregard for human rights is the central theme of her thesis. Now she must find the other protagonist, Cheshire, and make sure he meets her father. Dad cannot start a revolution alone, but Lilith wants to understand what that event meant. The novel does not say how they met, but if Lilith is alive, the Duke will not be interested in Cheshire. Therefore, the girl must force the meeting. But it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Walking down the street, she noticed shadows sneaking away in an alley, and her father stopped. He also thought there was a conflict, but he asked her not to worry, as there are patrols everywhere. Lilith objected that they should stop them, but her father didn't want his little girl to risk herself for nonsense. So he asked her not to be afraid and just walk, saying that her dad is so strong that nothing is scary. Translation failed. Translation failed. The thugs thanked his lordship, and wishing him the goddess's blessing again. They vanished. Seeing all this, the girl was only convinced that the revolution was really necessary. She told her father that life in the capital was amazing, but then she remembered that boy was still there. Approaching him, she asked if he was okay, although his appearance said absolutely everything. Suddenly, she noticed blood on his face and asked to help him, offering him a handkerchief. However, the boy immediately pushed her hand away, as if she were about to do something terrible. Lilith understood he was scared and only apologized for touching him so suddenly. Then she placed the handkerchief on his leg, so the boy could take care of the wound himself. She felt sorry for him, as she had seen how they beat that boy, and at that moment, she only thought about that. But despite his wounds and the dirt on his face, Lilith found that boy very handsome. Suddenly, a thought about the meaning of his jet black hair flashed through her mind. And his red eyes. It's the world of the novel, and one rule persists. The girl understood that it was Cheshire himself. Just in case, she decided to ask his name to confirm, but he remained silent as a tomb. The Duke approached and asked how he felt, hoping the boy wasn't suffering too much. The boy just got up silently and tried to leave, but his wounded leg prevented him. And Enoch offered him his hand. The red-eyed boy again refused the friendly hand, as if it were offered by an enemy. But the Duke was not offended. He understood the boy's feelings, but Lilith couldn't calm down and asked the boy to wait. Her father stopped her, explaining that in the world there are many people who hate nobles. Probably for that reason, that boy felt uncomfortable, and the Duke proposed leaving things as they were. Lilith remembered again that this was the world of the novel, and the original script should follow its course. She thought this was the mysterious encounter, described as coincidence. Following the path, Lilith asked her father if she could be friends with whomever she wanted. The Duke stopped, not fully understanding what she meant. Then she clarified, asking if she could be friends with a commoner, being a noble herself. Enoch believed that it didn't matter if she was noble, talented, or a common person. Lilith can be friends with anyone. For him, the important thing is that his daughter is happy, and then Lilith became interested in where that boy had gone. For some reason, she kept worrying about him, even though she had just met him. Then she confessed that she wanted to be friends with that boy and asked her father to look for him later. She is also interested in whether his wounds are curable and also wanted to talk to him. Faced with this, the Duke only laughed sincerely and proudly declared that he had created an angel. He picked her up and promised to find that boy, especially since he never said no to his princess. This made Lilith very happy, and in gratitude, she hugged her daddy tightly. Meanwhile, she thought that, according to the plot, Cheshire should be living in Marquis Onyx's mansion at that time. Late at night, in the Marquis's mansion, a certain Jonathan was being scolded for trying to get rid of that boy, and he was shouting that he couldn't stand that brat in the house. But the father feared that if he threw him out on the street, his abilities might be discovered. The Marquis worried that an investigation into his origin would begin, and everyone would know he was his illegitimate son. He didn't want to tell the world about his existence, so he decided to simply lock him up and raise him in secret. But Jonathan screamed that they should kill that creature, because he couldn't breathe the same air as him. The Marquis didn't expect such a declaration from his legitimate son, but he forbade him from doing anything like that, promising him, however, that he wouldn't interfere in other matters. The young Marquis, grinding his teeth, looked furiously at his half-brother, but he also didn't want to anger his father. And when the old man left, he grabbed the boy by the neck, as if he were going to hit him, and insulted him with the worst words. Cheshire couldn't resist, and just watched as the young Marquis's fist was raised above him. He himself didn't believe he could have any abilities, even though he was the son of a gifted one. At the same time, he felt very tired and simply closed his eyes, expecting the inevitable. When they left the boy alone in the dark cell, he thought it would be easier to die, but he didn't even have the strength for that. In his pocket, he felt a handkerchief, which a little girl had recently given him, and instantly, he remembered how she sincerely apologized for accidentally touching him. That girl seemed like an angel to him, but she was just a noble, and now he didn't understand why he even accepted her handkerchief. Many thoughts ran through his head that dark night, and turning on his side, he started praying to die. When the Duke and his daughter reached the gates, the girl was amazed. She would never have imagined it. The palace was incredibly huge, and before entering, Lilith asked her dad to wait a little. She needed to mentally prepare. Besides, her dad hadn't been here for 7 long years, and when the gates finally opened, several servants rushed out to welcome the young master. Butler Rem was happier than anyone, unable to believe that the Duke had finally returned. Then, the servant noticed the little girl and realized she was the young miss. Bending down to her level, he greeted her, and she introduced herself as Lilith. Then, the butler stood up, and bowing, introduced himself to the young lady as appropriate, asking her to simply call him Rem, and the maids admired that the little one looked like an angel, and they noticed that she strongly resembled the master. Enoch interrupted, asking Rem how much longer they were going to stand in the street, and he immediately invited them inside. He apologized to the Duke and Lilith, explaining that it was the most emotional moment in his 50 years. On the way, Rem confessed that rumors said the Emperor had ordered the knights to bring Enoch, but nobody expected this. Nevertheless, the elder Duke will be happy to see them, and Lilith remembered that he radiates pressure whenever he appears. His name is Enoch Rubinstein. He possesses special abilities, and the pages about him were imbued with greatness. In the original story, he was very kind to Cheshire, although he feigned indifference, but secretly he worried. Lilith hoped her grandfather would also be kind to her, although it would surely take great effort for him to do so. Rem also announced that Lady Hordia, Enoch's sister, was there, as she always believed her brother would return. For the girl, it was the first time she heard her aunt's name, as she was never mentioned in the original novel. Afterwards, Rem promised to order the kitchen staff to prepare the best delicacies the Duke had ever tasted. And then they reached the entrance, and when the main door opened, Lilith gasped. Stunning, everything there seemed not only beautiful but real, as if it surpassed the Emperor's. She doubted whether the gold surrounding her was real, as almost everything was adorned with it. But it looked like it. It seems James' brain hid not only his power, but immense wealth. The Duke advanced confidently, but the girl became uneasy, and upon reaching Nordic's office, she panicked. The office was spacious, but it seemed covered by the shadow of the old Duke Rubinstein sitting at the desk. Enoch's sister exclaimed immediately, covering her mouth. She still couldn't believe he had returned. Enoch greeted his father, and Lilith confirmed that Nordic's presence was not an exaggeration. Despite everything, she tried to calm down when her father brought her close to her grandfather. The old man stood up, but his greeting was more than discreet, and his face showed no happiness whatsoever. Enoch noticed that his father had aged a little since they last saw each other. But right there, Nordic raised his staff against his son instead of hugging him. Rem barely managed to shout at him to calm down. A child was present. That stopped him. Lilith herself clung to her father with all her might. She felt him tremble. Nordic looked at the girl with doubt, but Enoch proudly declared that she was his little princess. It seems the old man was offended that his son raised his daughter alone for 7 years, without announcing that he was still alive. Apparently, Nordic thought his son had stayed away all these years because of Lilith. In the grandfather's place, the girl would also hate someone like her, but she didn't expect that reaction. Then she apologized to the old man, but Enoch immediately became indignant. His princess should not apologize for anything, and he asked his father to soften his expression, because with that face, he was scaring the little one. Nordic mumbled something, and the girl squinted one eye open. She had previously closed it tightly due to the fright. She saw her grandfather extending his hand towards her and thought he was going to hit her, and immediately closed her eyes again, imagining in an instant how everything could turn out. However, Nordic knelt down beside her and only gently touched her cheek. Then he stroked her silver hair. When she opened her eyes, Lilith was visibly surprised, not understanding what was happening. But then she understood that grandfather was behaving quite kindly towards her, and her father was silently happy on the side. So she introduced herself to the old man and declared that she was very happy to finally meet him. Afterwards, they had a pleasant family hug, and there was no trace of anger left on the old man's face. On the contrary, he seemed happy. Later, Ordia took the little one to introduce her to her cousins, who were also twins. They had always wanted a little sister, and Aunt was sure they would love Lilith. These twins were also heirs to the Antras ducal family. One will become a holy knight, and the other a magic swordsman. Outside her room, Ordia explained that Tio was a bit weak and she was worried. Then she opened the door and called her boys, asking them to greet their cousin. And the girl remembered that in this novel everyone dies, and these two died in the end. The twins were among the few to whom Cherish truly opened her heart, and after their death, he almost went mad. But in any case, they look as if someone copied and pasted them. Immediately they stared at the little one who entered, and couldn't believe she was so small. And Ordi admitted that they are so alike that when they want to fool her, not even she can always tell them apart. She explained to Leo and Tio that their uncle had returned some time ago. Then she introduced little Lilith to them. The first one to greet her was Tio, declaring that he was already 12 years old. The girl remembered that in the original story, he died first, and that he became a holy knight. Furthermore, he had a kind and affectionate nature, and took care of Cheshire like a true older brother. But in the spring, after being named a knight, he dies tragically due to a congenital disease. However, that will happen in 4 years, and now Lilith greets him cheerfully. Leo was standing to the side, and his mother asked him to come closer and greet his cousin. The boy joked that the girl was lying about her age, since he was much taller at 7 years old. Then Ordia smiled and explained that her sons, although they look alike, have very different personalities. Tio is kind and tender, while Leo is mainly mischievous, and that worried her a bit, which immediately made her indignant. And his mother asked him to behave more calmly, reminding him that if he kept acting like that, no girl would like him. She also reminded him how he scared the dancer with a giant spider, to which the boy declared that lady likes spiders. His mother was sure that girl only wanted to please him, that's why she said it. But no lady was like that. Leo was playful and talkative, which often caused disputes with Cheshire, although he didn't seriously mean it. In the novel, Leo died in a massive battle to exterminate monsters, covering for Cheshire. That part of the novel was written heartbreakingly. Lilith almost cried when she remembered it, but now she greeted him, offering to be friends, and even hunt spiders together. She declared that she also really liked spiders, but actually, she just wanted to get close to him. It was then that she noticed Leo's brother looking at her in a strange way. And then he took her chubby pink cheek and squeezed it a little like a piece of cotton candy. But it seems the boy miscalculated the force, and the girl hurt a lot. She even screamed. Ordia got scared for the little one, and Tio yelled at his brother for pinching her so hard. Lilith herself understood that it hurt, but she didn't want to cry. And it just happened. Right at that moment, she remembered the story. And Tio started fluttering around her, begging her not to cry. Ordia started scolding her mischievous son, so he wouldn't stand there, and immediately apologize for what he did. Aware that he had acted wrongly, the boy apologized to the little one, who assured him that nothing serious had happened. Even she apologized herself for suddenly crying, and assured him that it didn't hurt at all, really. She only asked him to be a little more gentle next time, as her skin is very sensitive. Leo had already realized that, but he still felt his mother's critical gaze on him, and the warning from his mother. Later that night, when it was dinner time, Lilith couldn't believe how extravagant the appetizers were. She was seated at the table between the two brothers, and when everything was ready, they could start eating. Aunt Hordia asked the little one to eat more, worrying about her health. Lilith was a bit confused, because there were many utensils and she didn't know where to start or what to do. But then she decided to look at Leo first, sitting next to her. That way she would know which utensil to use. At that instant, the door opened and the great Duke Rubinstein entered the dining room. Only Enoch was missing, who had promised to join them after unpacking his things. Lilith now understood what dishes nobles ate, but she was so nervous she couldn't tell if they were delicious. Suddenly, grandfather addressed Leo, telling him he knew about the uproar the boy had caused. Immediately, Ordia explained that her son apologized to the dancer, and that she herself would meet with her to apologize. From her tone, Lilith understood that something more important had happened, although before they had only talked about the spider. But then, grandfather explained that Leo was already 12 years old, so he should understand the meaning of the Rubinstein name, and always carefully check and control his actions to avoid any kind of trouble. He must follow protocol and not act senselessly, as well as behave in a way that others admire him. The old man also hoped not to hear anything that would tarnish the family name. He was the perfect example of a noble family. His speech seemed so dignified that she almost cried. She had never studied etiquette, and now she was ashamed. She didn't know how to eat a steak. She decided to wait, hoping to see how others did it. But Leo noticed she wasn't starting to eat. Tio also noticed she wasn't holding the utensils and assumed she was already full. His aunt also caught the worry, not understanding what was wrong with the girl. Lilith felt like she was the center of attention and didn't know whether to confess that she didn't know the rules. Aunt and grandfather knew she didn't use utensils, but she was worried about disappointing them even more. And to top it all off, Dad still hadn't shown up, who could solve something in this situation. Just at that moment, Enoch entered the dining room, apologizing for his delay. Lilith was inwardly happy that her savior finally arrived, immediately inviting her to eat with him. Suddenly, a screech from Audrey pierced the space, looking worriedly at her son Leo. The boy grabbed a huge piece of meat with a fork and began to chew greedily. Without manners, his brother Tio imitated his behavior, carelessly cutting a piece of meat as if it were the first time. This further outraged his mother, who didn't understand why he couldn't behave properly at the table. But Tio just extended the cut meat to Lilith to eat and kept his portion. Then, the girl realized that these boys treated her with great attention, and they noticed that she was having trouble with the utensils. She was so happy to have such wonderful brothers that a satisfied smile spread across her face. But his mother was worried about such behavior, as if the boys wanted to be scolded. She immediately apologized to the father, but he asked her to stop, which was a bit surprising to her. And spearing a piece of meat on the fork, the old man simply asked them to start eating. Everyone began to eat in silence, and when Lilith tasted the first bite, she felt incredible pleasure. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw her father watching her and smiling as if he had won a prize. And noticing her grandfather's questioning gaze, the girl declared that the food was very tasty. The grandfather nodded in approval and asked his granddaughter to eat more. After dinner, Enoch took his daughter to her new room, which was huge, and it was full of toys. The girl was overjoyed, and she even danced, celebrating that she would live amidst so much luxury. And seeing the soft and fluffy bed, she fell onto it and sank into the duvet as if on a cloud. Enoch approached her and asked if she remembered the boy they found in the alley. Upon receiving an affirmative answer, he confessed that he had practically found him. That very little was missing. He suggested to his daughter that, as soon as she finished, she should ask the boy if he needed help. Lilith thanked him, but asked him not to rush. She understood that it would be difficult to find Cheshire now. They had met by chance before, and, according to the original story, they wouldn't meet his father until 2 years later. Right now, they are hiding him on Marquis Onyx's estate, and his father has just returned. And he doesn't know how the capital works. He is not one to rely on illegal guilds operating clandestinely to find someone. Even so, the girl understood that she had to help somehow and asked her father not to worry and go to sleep. In the morning, the butler introduced her to the maids Jetty and June, who would take care of her while her father was busy. He has to take care of resuming his duties after 7 years of absence. Rem also reported that these maids are very experienced and will be excellent assistants. Yeti was the first to introduce herself and list her merits, and she also draws and cooks wonderfully. June is her younger sister and is also quite talented. Mainly, she stood out for her excellent physical shape and now swore to serve Lilith with soul. In heart, the girl didn't fully understand what these skills were for taking care of a baby, but she thanked them anyway. June picked up the little one, and both maid sisters began to admire how adorable she was. The butler interrupted them, saying it was time to finish the introductions, and he proceeded to inform Lilith of the schedule. The master instructed them to begin her education starting today, and the teachers were due at 10 in the morning. From the servants' faces, It was clear they regretted a little that she had to study on her second day in the capital. Still, Lilith wanted to study, she was good at it, and promised to try her best. The first class was mathematics, and the teacher, Countess Lena, started with an apple problem. They had to solve an equation, of the kind usually learned in primary school. They were asked to multiply 2 apples by 2, and then add 2 more, and Leo instantly replied that it would be 6. The teacher asked him not to rush, and to give the young lady a chance to answer. Lilith herself liked that they answered for her, since mathematics had always been difficult. Unlike humanities, the teacher told her not to worry, and that it was okay if she made a mistake. She even offered to suggest the answer. Leo whispered to his sister that she wasn't obliged, which angered the teacher again, who asked him not to interrupt. Lilith, meanwhile, thought she had no time for lessons because she needed to find Cheshire. At age 11, he became part of her family. Now, at 11, she will have to endure 2 years of hardship imposed by the Marquis. Lilith didn't want that boy to suffer, and planned to help her father find him as soon as possible. First, she needs to find the guild leader, who in a few years will become an ally of her father. But to meet him, she must leave first. But they won't let a child go out alone, much less in the middle of class. Unconsciously, the girl completed the whole table. Elena didn't understand how she had done it. The siblings, looking at her sheet, were also surprised, noticing that their sister was very intelligent, especially because Lilith solved the multiplications by 19 without extra calculations, and even she was amazed. The girl understood that this could end badly, as a 7-year-old child could not solve that table. Although, on the other hand, there are child prodigies, so the situation might not be so serious. And if she finishes her studies quickly, she can start helping Dad sooner. Then she explained to the teacher that she had succeeded, because she had explained everything very well. And she reminded her how Lena had started with the example of the apples that had to be multiplied. Still, the Countess was perplexed, as she hadn't explained the 19 times table. The girl asked her not to make a big deal out of it, and instead, to tell her a little more about multiplication. Here the Countess declared that the young lady was a talented genius, born once every 100 years. Then, taking the little one by the hands, she promised to do everything possible to help her learning. The girl was happy, but at that moment, she didn't know that this action would later lead her to a huge catastrophe. A little later, when it was lunchtime, Lilith tasted the dessert and was incredibly ecstatic. It wasn't just delicious, but the best thing in the world, the absolute best thing one could eat. The brothers advised her to try other dishes and shoved pieces everywhere for her. She stuffed the delicacies into both cheeks, which made her look like a squirrel. But at the same time, she looked very tender. Aunt was also happy that the girl ate a lot. She only asked her to eat slower so as not to get indigestion. From outside, the sound of an arriving carriage was heard, and Ordia excitedly noticed that it was Countess Ballerina. Along with this guest, her daughter Erica also arrived, and they greeted the hosts from the street. Leo suddenly decided to hide behind her, but Lilith clarified to him that he was completely visible. Then, Tio explained that his brother didn't like Erica much, and days ago, he scared her with a giant spider. The girl became very upset, and Leo received a good reprimand from his mother, so he doesn't want Erica to see him. But just at that moment, Erica entered the room, and upon seeing Leo, she went straight to him. Seeing that he was trying to hide behind the little one, the young countess demanded an explanation of what was going on. Suddenly, tension was palpable in the air. Erica knew nothing about her sister Lilith, and demanded to know who that girl was. Her speech, with notes of jealousy, seemed a bit strange to Lilith, more like something from a medieval romance novel. Then, Ordia entered asking about Erica's forehead, who replied that she should ask who that girl was instead. And she found out she was the boy's cousin, who had returned yesterday with Duke Rubinstein. Erica felt uncomfortable, explaining that they hadn't told her anything about it. Her mood instantly changed, and turning to the Duke's daughter, she flattered her by saying she looked like an angel. Then she admitted to feeling a little jealous of her because of Leo, and introduced herself as Erica Ballerina, 12 years old. In response, Lilith also introduced herself politely, not forgetting to praise her appearance. Erica smiled and, just in case, confessed that she had already promised to spend her whole life with Leo. This immediately outraged Leo. But Erica kept talking about future family plans, ignoring him completely. Lilith understood that the girl was serious. Apparently, she liked bad boys, judging by how clingy she was. At night, her father literally burst into Lilith's room, opening the door so abruptly that she jumped, and immediately ran to hug her, because he had missed her terribly all day. When his fervor calmed down a bit, they talked about dinner, and Enoch confessed that he had eaten a little while ago. And the daughter recounted how she had gone with her aunt and brothers to the tailor, where they took her measurements, and bought her some clothes. She loved going shopping, especially a dress that was identical to a princess's. Then, Enoch asked about her studies, and his daughter admitted that she had been studying for several hours. The father apologized, explaining that the grandfather had insisted on some extra classes. But the girl didn't get angry, understanding that one must learn everything, and besides, she found it fun. This surprised Enoch a little, and his daughter promised to let him know if it became tedious and boring. After hearing her, Enoch admitted that the teacher had praised her a lot and called her a genius. He never doubted it. She didn't see it as something great, since that is learned in primary school, but she was glad her father was happy. He hugged her tightly again and began to pamper her, implying that she had inherited his intelligence. By then, Lilith was already having a lot of fun and laughing out loud. She kept agreeing with him. Then she grew curious about what her daddy had done all day. Although it was obvious he had a lot of work, she loved seeing her father proud. She even started to believe she was a genius. When the next lesson arrived, the girl realized she had gotten too carried away with her genius status. The professor was Robert Quinn, a guy who works in the Magic Tower in the talent study department. Enoch noticed his daughter's anxiety and asked her to calm down, to answer that man calmly. He even advised her that if she didn't know something, she shouldn't be afraid to admit it. After a while, when the professor reviewed the results, he too had to admit that the girl was a genius. In this world, if children have talent for things like mathematics, the Magic Tower monitors them to train them. Beforehand, the grandfather contacted the tower to assess Lilith, but Enoch got angry because Nordic didn't even consult him. But the old man explained that it was a normal test and that his granddaughter would go to the Magic Tower anyway. And if the result was good, Enoch could act more freely while Lilith was training. In the Pavilion Empire, everyone with special abilities must be called for service, and the tower takes care of that. And after announcing his decision, Nordic called Lilith herself to talk. During the conversation, the grandfather asked her not to worry and just do the same as in classes. Now Lilith understood that she shouldn't have exaggerated, as the situation took an unexpected turn for her. In magic, formulas are indispensable, and those who create them are workers of the Magic Tower. All of them are mathematics geniuses. That's why the tower looks for talents and prepares their training from childhood. The girl remembers that this was described in the original, but she didn't think everything would turn into such a catastrophe. Now she felt not like a genius, but like an idiot. And after the test, they introduced her to another person. In the hall, sitting on a carved chair, was Oscar Manuel, and he is the youngest head of the Magic Tower in history. Lilith forgot all her problems for a moment. She never dreamed she would meet such an important character. The head of the tower is his enemy. Her father was preparing for a rebellion, recruiting high-ranking talents. Nobles and politicians were on Oscar's side, and he never helped Lilith's father. If they had had the support of the Magic Tower, where he is key, the revolution would have ended 3 years earlier. But Lilith is not sure if Oscar supported the Empire. She could never understand his motives, and she decides to pretend to be a genius and join the Magic Tower to win Oscar's favor. After that, she felt much better. She only has to solve problems like yesterday. And when Professor Robert showed his results to her father, he himself became convinced that Lilith is a genius. But Oscar, for some reason, was dissatisfied, saying he didn't come to see childish things. Then, in a brusque tone, he ordered them to check everything thoroughly and opened another problem on the board. They gave the girl a linear equation, and Oscar suggested she try it, doubting her success. She didn't plan to solve it. It seemed crazy to her, and she noticed that the man was obsessed with genius. She simply declared that she didn't know the solution, which greatly surprised the head of the tower. Immediately, the teacher told her not to worry, as not even prodigies usually solve it at 7 years old. Then Enoch took his daughter in his arms and affirmed that the task was very difficult. But his princess was a genius. The only unsatisfied one was the head of the tower, thinking he had wasted time on a stupid girl. He started to leave, and Lilith understood that this was bad. Just as her father asked Oscar to wait, he demanded that he repeat his words. And immediately he called Lilith a stupid girl again, who made him waste time. This infuriated the Duke, and in an angry tone, He demanded that Oscar apologize to his daughter, but he believed they should apologize to him for making him waste an hour and a half. He only came because he was curious to see the daughter of that Enoch Rubinstein. Now he is sure that she is like the other children, and she only got lucky solving the number problem. But the Duke insisted that no one else would do what she did at 7 years old. After this, he again demanded an apology from the head of the tower, but Oscar flatly refused to do so. The atmosphere grew tense. Enoch was about to unleash his anger, and Nordic was barely restraining him. Then the grandfather apologized himself to Oscar and asked to leave everything as it is, regretting not meeting expectations. Faced with this, the head of the tower also insulted the old man, declaring that of his sharp mind, which he once respected so much, nothing remained. Lilith listened to all this and was not going to allow the one who insulted her family to go unpunished. Oscar's words about her being useless with empty dreams only propelled her to take the next step, and also his advice to the Duke to focus on the family he abandoned and lead it properly. And then Lilith declared that she would solve that equation, greatly surprising everyone present. The girl only asked for 5 minutes to solve it, but she set a condition. If she succeeded, Oscar would personally apologize to her father and grandfather for his foolish words. With a grimace simulating a smile, the head of the magic tower agreed. But Enoch got worried and begged the little one not to force herself to do it. But the girl had already made a decision. And for 5 minutes, everyone watched as she intricately traced with chalk on the blackboard. And when she wrote a column of several simple equations, she turned towards Oscar and declared that he was 17 years old. Seeing the brilliant solution, he admitted his defeat and bowed to apologize to the Dukes. Lilith was curious why that guy had suddenly become so polite. She thought he would remain indignant. In his eyes, she now saw a kind of madness, with which he made a proposal regarding Lilith's education. But she expected nothing less from a person of that level, although the girl didn't fully understand what was happening. After that, they had dinner with the head of the magic tower, and he even offered to train the girl personally. She accepted only because it was an opportunity to try to win him over to her side. But while trying to do something, everything got worse, and when she saw him enter through the door, she was unexpectedly scared. Oscar entered and thanked them for the meal. Then he sat down calmly, and at that moment looked like a completely different person. It was then that the head proposed to the girl to do a little more mathematics. What wouldn't you do to achieve your goal? And Lilith accepted again, without further objection. He started to explain how to create a magic formula and mathematically express the concept of space. From this, the girl understood that magic is very systematic, and then she discovered that numbers smaller than 0 exist. Oscar showed the equation. In reality, Lilith knew it, but she decided to pretend it was the first time she had seen anything like it. It was obvious that the head of the tower was going to tell her about the concept of negative numbers. Suddenly, Oscar blurted out unexpectedly that the girl looked not only small, but tiny. It also seemed to him that, for 7 years old, her height was abnormally low. There was a good reason for that, but Lilith had the impression that he knew something about it. Then Oscar ventured that it was because she ate very little, and that's why she grew so slowly. The girl didn't know if he was talking nonsense, or if he truly ignored her big secret, and the head insisted that she must eat more to grow, and thus work together. Working in the magic tower would make her life easier, and, although she didn't want to, she promised to think about it. At night, Lilith remembered that she wasn't the only one who noticed she was very small for 7 years old. Before, she thought he was a secondary character, and that he simply grew slower than other children. But there was a reason for it, something natural for the Duke's daughter, which she wasn't really. Kidnapped by the imperial family, she was an unhappy secondary character, until her death was revealed. While Lilith was thinking about it, her dad came and, calling her a genius again, reminded her it was time to sleep. The nickname was starting to tire the girl a little, and she begged her daddy not to call her that anymore. Her father didn't understand why, if she had done so well, and the grandfather had a strange smile on his face. Nordic had always taught his son to be cold, but today he himself did not hide his enthusiasm. However, Lilith still had a lot to think about, and she asked her daddy to go to sleep. But the father decided that he simply wasn't sleepy and offered to read her an interesting children's book. The story he prepared to read to her was called The Princess Locked in the Tower. Enoch liked reading books to his daughter, and although she didn't like it, she waited patiently for him to finish. The Duke began to read about how a king and a princess once lived, and he loved his daughter very much. Over time, the princess turned 7, and the evil king of a neighboring country kidnapped her. The princess's father cried every day and offered treasures to the evil king, even becoming his servant. But he still didn't return the princess. At this point, Lilith felt a chill. She didn't understand how they could separate a father from his daughter. And then she realized the story sounded familiar. The good king, consumed by sadness, one day met a boy, and this boy was very strong. The king took him in like a son, and believed that someday he would meet the princess, and he would be a good brother to her. At this moment, Lilith begged him to continue. The plot was becoming fascinating, and she heard that, one night, the evil king informed the good one that the princess had fallen ill and died. Now Enoch got worried, not understanding what was happening with this story, but his daughter insisted that he keep reading. She explained that the evil king might be lying, and she believed the princess was still alive. Then, the duke read that the good king became furious and decided to take revenge on the evil king along with the prince. They defeated all the villains of that kingdom and captured the evil king, preparing to execute him. This story was very familiar to Lilith. The plot strongly recalled Enoch Rubinstein's novel. She saw her father in the role of the good king, taking revenge for his daughter's death. And that princess was Lilith Rubinstein herself. For the duke's kidnapped daughter to return, he entered the battlefield countless times. And when he learned that his daughter had died, his sword turned towards the emperor. His daughter was living under a secret identity. The emperor found out, hid her, and used her power. The princess, deceived by the emperor, began to kill people uncontrollably. Enoch Rubinstein wanted to get his daughter back, but he could never find a way. And in the whole empire, only one person was capable of stopping her. Reaching this tense point, Enoch decided to stop reading. It wasn't a children's story. In the future, he would review the stories before reading them to his daughter. But she affirmed that, despite everything, the ending was happy, which surprised Enoch. And Lilith explained that, if the princess hadn't been kidnapped, the good king wouldn't take revenge on the bad one. She didn't feel sorry for the princess, because the king brainwashed her and she killed many people. Enoch didn't see a happy ending because the princess died, something Lilith denied. And her father explained that the good king was the hero, and his beloved daughter died. That is a tragedy. In the end, everyone lived happily, except the protagonist. What irony! And if the protagonist is not happy, it is a bad ending. A father who loses his daughter cannot be happy. As Enoch explained, Lilith remembered that in the original story, everything ended well. After Cheshire struck Enoch Rubinstein's daughter, everything ended with the description of the birth of a new peaceful empire. However, she became curious to know what happened to Dad after the original story reached its end. She didn't know if the protagonist was happy in the peaceful country, built on his daughter's grave. And then she imagined how Enoch would live after her death, if he were a good king, and she a princess. For an instant, the Duke was horrified, and then declared that in that case he couldn't live at all. Then he assumed that in that fairy tale, a good king might think exactly the same. And when he found out that the princess was dead, he wouldn't follow her immediately, because he planned to do it after his revenge. Suddenly, Lilith realized that her daddy would also die, and he explained that she would understand when she had her own children. And hugging his daughter, Enoch repeated that if he lost his princess, he would follow her. This only disturbed the girl more. She even screamed as if she had just had a nightmare. Then, the Duke explained that it was just a story, and that he would not allow such a thing to happen. And if such a thing happened, he would not offer the evil king to be his servant, but would immediately rescue the princess from confinement. Suddenly, Lilith asked if all the gifted ones had to go to the battlefield when the emperor ordered it. Enoch confirmed it, but also repeated what he had said before, that his princess did not have to do it. The girl hesitated, since if it were discovered that she had a powerful ability, she would be obliged to go. It turns out the Duke already had a plan, which he himself did not consider special, but he didn't say which one, because it was already bedtime. But Lilith already imagined what her daddy was talking about, since he was soon going to have a personal meeting with the emperor, and most likely he would ask His Majesty to release his daughter from service. Furthermore, the bargaining chip for the emperor is obvious. From now on, the Duke will be a dog that obeys without protest. As in that story, the good king could do nothing else but serve the evil king. And even if his daughter wasn't kidnapped, Dad would still not be free, because he would ask for her release from service. In any case, the good king will be a pawn of the evil one, and fight in a war where there is no possible victory. Her dad is the main hero, who hates empires like this, which follow the path of tyranny and conquest. Now he cannot forget his words about the bad ending of the story, because his father will not be able to live without his daughter. Lilith previously thought that his daughter was the beginning of the story, but in reality, it is a decision of revenge. Every action of the Duke was made for a goal, which was her, and in the end, everything ended in tragedy. It turns out that Lilith's goal now is not only to help Dad achieve a peaceful end. She herself must survive. If she stays by her father's side and is safe, then it doesn't matter what happens next. Lilith is sure that, after the end of the original story, Duke Rubinstein will get his happy ending. And for that, she promised herself to do anything for her father. In this empire, there is an organization that controls the gifted and divides them into 6 ranks. One of them is called First. It is the source of all magic and the omnipotent being, the closest to a god. Because of this, a first is born only once per generation and has only been born into the imperial family. The rank of the 12th prince was defined as 4th, and the emperor was furious that a first was not born. None of his 14 children were first, and this began to cause concern among the people. His Majesty greatly feared that one would never be born to him, but the mages asked him not to worry. Emperor Nicholas von Pavilion is still young and healthy, so he will surely have a first. 7 years ago, when Enoch left, the emperor was furious, as the duke's absence was a great loss of power. But Nicholas waited. He knew that the omnipotent first brainwashed even talented people. But that requires a considerable amount of vital force, especially if the target is someone like Enoch Rubinstein. His Majesty had to endure a lot to regain strength over 7 years. The emperor, who holds the title of conqueror, still suffered because of several nations. Now Nicholas learned that Duke Rubinstein had returned with his daughter. This is a great gift for the emperor, and soon only the name of the empire will remain on the continent. The next morning, Lilith had to go to the study room, and the maids took care of preparing her. The girl was sitting on the bed, with her feet dangling without touching the floor, and she remembered that they called her short. She understood it herself. Her growth seemed to have stopped, and that worried her, because if this continues, everyone might find out who she really is, and something urgent must be done about her height. But first, the first point of the plan must be fulfilled, and then get to the Skill Development Institute as soon as possible. Talents go there to obtain the Emperor's power and focus their abilities. Lilith must start using her powers now. If she absorbs vital force, she will grow like the others. At that instant, the maids were whispering about the 12th prince, 4th. Rumor has it that the gods abandoned the imperial family. They no longer give birth to firsts. Jun found this strange, as normally the first or second son always had that power. Yeti nodded. There are many princes, but still no heir. First, a being with absolute power, born once per generation and only in the imperial family. But it seems this emperor was deprived of that pleasure, and Lilith was even glad about it. The maids thought that the first could have been born in another family, however ridiculous that sounds. Then, they continued dressing the little one, and gave her a rabbit head-shaped backpack. After thanking her, the girl immediately put it on. Now it was time to start her rescue mission. When the maid lifted her up to say goodbye, Lilith asked where the infirmary was located. Such a question seemed a bit strange to Jun, but she still explained how to get there. A short time later, the girl knocked on the door, and a young man, looking like he had just woken up, stuck his head out. Seeing the young Duchess, he was surprised, but she just greeted him kindly, calling him Flynn. The boy was very surprised that the girl knew his name, since she hadn't even had time to introduce herself. Lilith explained that her sister had told her about him as a good doctor who helps in any situation, and immediately stated that she was perfectly healthy, while gifting him some flowers she had cut in the garden. This cheered Flynn up. Now the somewhat boring atmosphere would be perfectly adorned with a vase of flowers. The girl didn't waste time and asked if the doctor had fairy tears. They are also called salvation. It is a marvelous medicine, and Lilith wanted to know where to get them. It is quite a rare plant, and the royal family watches it closely and only gives it to a few families once a month. But as a direct descendant of the Rubinstein family, Lilith has the right to it, and the doctor considered her a suitable candidate. Seeing his good humor, the girl asked him to give her a little bit to make tea for her dad. The care for her father deeply moved Flynn, and without hesitation, he agreed to give her some of the medicine. Then he extended a form to her and asked the girl to write her name there. Very quickly, Lilith wrote down her details and after receiving her portion of medicine, put it in her backpack. Now she needs to go out, but for that she needs an escort. They wouldn't let her go out alone for anything in the world. And she began to think about who is strong enough to help her get out and protect her while she is away from home. First, she thought of Jetty and June, but then the girl thought it wasn't the best idea. Her thoughts turned to her personal guard, but she didn't consider him a suitable candidate either. Sir Lewis, the best warrior in the Rubinstein family's personal army. He's no good for this either. The answer came on its own when her cousins approached and suggested playing. They themselves started suggesting games, and one of the options was to chase ants in the street. The twins were talented people. They already finished the academy and proved their skills. Their rank is 2. In this house, they are the strongest after the Duke. And then Lilith told them she was too tired to play and wanted to eat. But she didn't want to go to the dining room, saying that the food didn't taste good that way, that she craved something unusual. However, that doesn't exist here, and the worried brothers started asking her what exactly their little sister wanted. The girl wanted the food she used to eat with her dad when they lived in the old house. Tio suggested asking the chef to prepare it, but Leo objected, since their chefs don't know what common people eat. So they simply thought of going out to eat, and suggested their sister go with them to a restaurant. There was still the doubt of whether they would be allowed. His mother wouldn't let them go to a commoner's restaurant. One of the brothers was thinking how to convince his mother, while Lilith pressed him by saying she was very hungry. And then Leo came up with the idea that it wasn't necessary to ask for permission. They could just escape. To leave the estate, they snuck through a small hole in the fence. It was the only way to leave without being seen. Captain Theo had devised that plan, and as she crawled through the narrow tunnel, Lilith was glad she didn't have claustrophobia. Unfortunately, the boys couldn't make a bigger hole, because then it would be too noticeable. But the girl didn't give up, and very soon, after her brothers, she found herself on the other side of the fence. Although she got very dirty, she didn't care about the dirt. The important thing was that everything was going according to her plan. Then, the brothers took their sister by the hands, preparing to move forward. Suddenly, one of the boys felt a sudden dizziness, and Lilith panicked. Her brother understood that it was another attack and suggested going to rest to avoid problems. Theo assured that he was fine, that this always happened 5 days after a headache. Now Lilith remembered that he has a very rare disease and that the attack would occur in 5 days. The role of one of the twins, destined to die in the original story, a step for Cheshire's growth, and a way to move the reader. That's why the kind Theo was conceived from the beginning with a rare congenital disease. He must cure Cheshire, who closed off after the taunts, and then leave once his task is fulfilled. Theo falls ill due to mana collision, a rare disease that causes periodic seizures in the body. He will die in spring, after being knighted. In other words, he is living his last years. The boy noticed how worried Lilith was, and thought she also felt bad, but she assured that she was fine. Theo's illness is incurable, but there is a way to fight that is in an ancient text. It mentions the heart of the saints, a simple metaphor. No one knew what it really referred to, but Cheshire figured it out. After Theo's death, he became obsessed with solving the enigma. In the end, he found the heart of the saint and brought it to Theo's grave, regretting being late. He suffered horrors to understand the message, and Lilith doesn't even have a chance to find it easily. But suddenly, illumination. She already knows what she needs. She has read the original 1,000 times. That means she can save him. He will no longer have to suffer or feel that horrible pain. Lilith approached her little brother and asked him to buy her something tasty. Some candy. This was also part of the plan. They went to a specific street, and the girl pointed to a store. It's Will Duncan's shop, owned by a former swordsman and his young squire. The sign didn't look very reliable, but it was the biggest shop in the alley. Lilith is sure that the Holy Heart is there, and they entered. The seller greeted them kindly. The boys immediately started looking around. They had never been to a place like this, and Lilith was already scheming something. On one of the shelves, she saw a small glass box. It was exactly what she needed. Then she approached the brothers and declared that she wanted that pretty little thing. The 3 of them, both the boys and the seller, were horrified when they saw what the little one had chosen as a gift. The liquid inside shone purple and looked like stars in a jar. Lilith looked at it fascinated. From the outside, it looked like she had mistaken it for a toy. Then, the seller explained that it was a mana core and that it had been extracted from the body of a dead beast. He also explained that it was not appropriate for a noble lady, and Leo added that it was very dangerous. Mana constantly leaks from the core, and carrying it with you makes you addicted. Now it is in a special glass box that partially seals the mana, and although Lilith swore she could handle it, Leo doubted it. She wasn't even in the academy. The girl insisted, and her brother started getting angry, asking her to stop whining. But Lilith knew that there were 5 days left until Theo's attack, and there would be no other opportunity. She knows how to prevent the illness and she doesn't want her brother to suffer because of this. And since they wouldn't give in, she only had one option left: throw herself on the floor, kick and scream. The perfect moment to use childhood privileges, because only a child cries like that. In the end, the girl got what she wanted, and the monster's core was put into a pendant. But the boys were worried. When their mother finds out about the expense, she will kill them. Lilith interrupted her drama, cheerfully saying that she loved the gift. Afterwards, they headed to Street 13 of Valentine District, to the rich restaurant. When ordering food, the twins couldn't believe their sister ate that in Zenon. But she loved it, and her father frequented this restaurant. She was happy to find it. Then, the brothers decided to order, and one of them immediately called the waitress and promised to pay double if the service was top-notch. The girl with the tray prepared to serve them, but Lilith suddenly stopped her. Leo whispered in her ear that she shouldn't raise her voice to common people outside the house. But Theo asked him not to be so harsh. Grandfather wasn't there, and Lilith still hadn't gotten used to it. Leo explained that she should get used to it quickly. Grandfather would scold her if she failed later. The girl continued her mission and slipped a gold coin to the waitress, hoping not to abuse her power. But this place was disguised as a simple restaurant, and Lilith ordered something off the menu. Actually, this place is the secret information brotherhood called Red Falcon, and the girl asked for sour herring, something that seemed very strange to her brothers. But Lilith didn't take her eyes off the waitress, and by her expression, she knew she had understood her perfectly. However, she explained that they didn't serve that dish alone, but they would prepare it if the honorable guest wished so. This pleased Lilith, and she declared that she could share her secret recipe while they prepared it. They didn't have to tell her twice. They immediately took her to the kitchen, which turned out to be completely empty. They went further, and the waitress, touching another door, went to someone called Rico, informing him that he had a visitor. From there, a deep male baritone resounded, inviting them in. The door opened slightly. Lilith was worried. She knows that Guy hates those with power, abilities, and status. He is the master of the Red Falcon Guild, called Rico, and he was now wearing a rather creepy mask. The mask looked at the girl with a horrible smile, and the voice from under it invited the girl to sit down. In the room itself, the atmosphere was also devilishly terrifying, but Lilith cautiously entered and sat down opposite Rico. Before starting the conversation, she asked for a minute to catch her breath, but the man asked how she found out about this place. The girl could have answered him, but she declared that he should give her some useful information first. It was like a vendor-buyer conversation, and she would pay not with money, but with information. Rico understood what she wanted and withdrew his question. He wasn't going to pay for that. Then he proposed to get to the point, but if the guest needed information, she first had to pay the commission for the deal. Lilith agreed and started by saying that Duke Rubinstein had returned to the capital after 7 years. Rico already knew that, which meant she would have to tell him something different. So she confessed to being Lilith, his 7-year-old daughter, but the masked man already knew that too. Then he leaned towards her, assuming that she had come there simply to have fun, and the girl confessed that, in fact, she had come to ask him for a favor. Afterwards, she asked if it was true that he had a son, whom he was hiding from Marquis Onyx. Rico became curious how the little girl, who had arrived in the capital 4 days ago, knew that and for what purpose she had come. She also heard that the tower personally came to verify her abilities, as she is a talented person. So, Lilith confessed to him that she wanted to save a child, and asked him to relay the Marquis's secret to her. Not necessarily to her. She asks that they relay it to anyone who can save Rico's son. Tim, behind the mask, understood that the young lady needed a messenger, and asked who the recipient would be. Lilith proudly declared that it was her father, Duke Enoch Rubinstein himself. For now, Dad only knows that boy's face, so he will need time to find him. Then she explained that her father had recently returned and didn't know how things were going. Besides, he has to take care of family matters. At that moment, Rico smiled mockingly, thinking that a 7-year-old girl couldn't have come alone, and he assumed that the Duke had sent her. Lilith assured that her dad knows nothing, which is why she asks for the information to be sent anonymously. The voice under the mask didn't understand why she herself couldn't tell the Duke what was happening. But then she would have to explain how she found out about everything. Riko understood that the little lady had a little secret she didn't want to reveal to her father. But she suddenly blurted out that she was actually looking for a replacement, which sounded somewhat suspicious. Suspicious. This meant that Riko must deliver the news of the illegitimate son to Duke Enoch. And the girl confirmed his assumption. But the man demanded to know more from Lilith for such a service. He wanted to know who this little one really was and where she got this information from. To this, she only explained that by hiding the name, no one would reveal her secret, although not everyone understands it, since it is reckless to expect a child to be so careless, and Lilith admitted that she is not new to business. Faced with this, the masked man only laughed, although the girl was speaking completely seriously. She has many secrets to reveal to Dad, and she hopes her dealings with Riko will be successful in the future. Riko immediately corrected her, reminding her that he only deals with information. And Lilith continued, saying she knew everything, and assured that Mr. Riko would be satisfied with the collaboration. Then he pushed a small package towards her, which he opened without haste. Inside was a bunch of grass, from which an almost imperceptible glow emanated. It is a universal antidote. Lilith explained that it can cure the illness of Riko's younger sister. The man clutched his head. He was always behind, but now, for the first time, he is one step ahead. Then, with more fury, he asked what the Rubinsteins were plotting and how the Duke found out his secret. Noticing Riko's anger, Lilith got a little scared, but assured that her father knew nothing about this. But the man didn't believe her and was already drawing a knife from its sheath, and she began to beg him to talk, and immediately added, angrily, that she herself would take care of everything and that she didn't need that guy's help. The man only laughed again, and then made a cut on the palm of his hand. The little one got very scared. She didn't understand what Riko was planning, and he immediately grabbed the bunch of grass. He was sure that the young Duchess knew it. That's why she had taken out the miraculous plant for him. In seconds, the grass flew out of his hand, and his wound healed without a trace. Only royalty knows this secret, and Madame Rubinstein will pay dearly if she trades in it. More calmly, Lilith begged him to use it discreetly so as not to arouse suspicion, and prepared to leave. But Riko stopped her. After a few moments of silence, he made the decision to remove the mask. Lilith covered her eyes instantly, aware that seeing the leader's face would condemn her. Seeing her terror, Riko begged her to look, but she needed guarantees that he wouldn't kill her. The man reminded her that he always keeps his promises and that he pays all his debts. The instant Lilith beheld his beautiful black-haired face, Riko announced that the deal was done. Later, Riko visited his sick sister, and the restaurant waitress scolded him. She didn't think it was right that he revealed his face, and she was curious to know who those children were. Riko only asked her to give information about Onyx's illegitimate son to Duke Rubinstein. The redhead didn't understand his behavior, nor would her own sister recognize him now. The Duke is surely plotting something, and he set up a farce for the girl while his sister suffers from magic. Riko only begged her to think about his request and repeated that she must give the information to the Duke. Moreover, one dose of antidote is not enough. She will need more. In the encounter, Lilith asked him to trust her. Riko didn't know what she wanted it for, but she would give him the antidote, so he could concede to such a request. He decided to trust her once, although he was unaware of the consequences, but he had been waiting a long time for such a savior. And Lilith, upon returning home, was glad to have found Riko, who promised to contact them through a guild member. It could be one of the servants, and it would suit the girl to have a man from Riko serving her. However, she had already gotten quite close to Jetty and Jun, who just appeared in her room. Seeing the little one drawing, Jetty praised her art, thinking she had painted a jellyfish. In reality, Lilith was drawing her dad, and the maid affirmed that the portrait resembled the Duke. Then, she asked the girl to try drawing something too, and Lilith immediately offered her the pencils. Jetty scribbled on the paper for a while, and in the end, a portrait of a girl appeared. Very beautiful. Lilith loved the work, and both maids admitted that it was their friend Richelle. Richelle also works as a maid on another estate like them, and she is also a descendant of Onyx. Lilith felt extreme curiosity. She didn't understand what Marquis Onyx had to do with all this. 1,000 thoughts went through her head, and she began to suspect who this girl might be. A week has passed since the Duke's return, and 7 days ago they met a boy. Everyone treated him like someone of lower rank, but the Duke was uneasy about it. And now he receives an anonymous letter, revealing that this boy is Onyx's illegitimate son. Enoch didn't believe it, but if they are truly mistreating the little one, he must find him now. The Duke didn't understand why this boy was specifically from that family, with whom he had no relationship. But now he needs to find a way to visit those people as soon as possible. When Enoch finished reading the letter, his daughter arrived, and he knew that their classes were over. The girl confessed that she loved the first class when the professor talked about famous sculptors and their works. Then she opened a book and showed her dad Lindell's sculpture called The Gates of Paradise. She would love to see this work live, and the Duke promised to take her to the museum. But it turns out that this work is not in the museum. The professor said that Marquis Onyx's family bought it, meaning that work is in their house. But the Duke cheered his daughter up again, saying she has a chance to see it. He promised Lilith to organize a trip, and soon they were already in the courtyard of the Marquis's mansion. The Marquis received them, and the Duke explained that his daughter wanted to see the work of art. Onyx happily agreed and introduced the guests to his wife and his son Jonathan. First the Marchioness greeted the guests, then the young Marquis, behaving very courteously. But Lilith instantly recognized the evil in that boy. Although she repressed her emotions, she just greeted him courteously, even shook his hand, although she was disgusted to do so. His feigned kindness seemed sincere, even to her own father. All the adults noticed that the children got along well, which even embarrassed Jonathan. The Marchioness asked her son to be nice to the lady, as they would see each other often. And who knows what would happen in the future. Hearing his mother, Jonathan offered to show Lilith the work of art, and his father boasted that he had taught the maids how to behave properly. All the maids stood still, with expressionless faces, but the girl decided to greet them immediately. Jonathan tried to stop her, but she paid no attention to him. She only asked the maids to take care of her. The maids seemed to thaw and agreed to take the little guest to see the gates of paradise. Then, one of the maids took the girl's hand and discreetly passed her a key. And a note, probably the location of the room we need, is written in that note. Lilith went to the painting hall with Jonathan, to whom his father had given some instructions. He needs to impress the Duke, because that will help him get good contacts. Showing Lilith one of the paintings, the boy explained that it was from the same era as the author Lindell. But the girl seemed not to hear him, and she ran around the room examining everything, which drove him crazy. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have been so kind, but now he must look after this girl. Understanding that he must calm down, he took a deep breath, as this girl can change his life. Then he invited her to the next hall, but noticed that there was no trace of her left. Jonathan only cursed. This girl was irritating him more and more. Lilith remembered that at the end of the exhibition hall on the 3rd floor, there was a side door, and behind it, a secret passage. It was exactly there that the little one was heading, hoping to find Cheshire there, whom they were holding on the 2nd basement floor, in the adjacent room. Meanwhile, that boy lay on a worn rug on the floor and was completely trembling. Feeling unwell, he remembered that his mother had died, unable to bear it, and kept praying for himself to die. He wanted to reunite with his mother soon. For an instant, he even thought that her ghost was leaning over him. He even felt her touch and jumped up, barely catching his breath that he lacked at that moment. Furthermore, Cheshire remembered Jonathan's warning not to approach the Duke, and that no one should know about him. Now the boy felt that nothing would save him, and that he was simply destined to die. Then he remembered the little girl, who in the alley worried about his injuries, and the warmth he felt from her. Cheshire, suddenly, decided to pray to God to send him a little angel to get him out of this hell. At that moment, the boy, who had already despaired, suddenly felt a huge desire to live. And then, as if by magic, the door opened, letting a ray of light into the dark room. And Cheshire saw the silhouette of a girl. It was the same girl he had seen in the alley, and she promised to get him out of there. The boy recognized her, but couldn't understand how she got there, and thought he was simply imagining it. And Lilith approached him, and in the ray of light falling, she saw recent bruises on his face. But now that wasn't the most important thing. They had to get out of there as soon as possible. The girl realized that she should have ignored everything and brought her father here from the beginning. For Cheshire, every minute in that place was hell. And Lilith felt guilty. That whole week, which was happiness for her, was at the same time hell for Cheshire. She apologized to him immediately. Although he didn't understand why, since she didn't even know him, he was more surprised that she couldn't control herself and cry as if someone had hurt her. But quickly wiping away her tears, Lilith held out her hand to him and asked him to follow her. Cheshire now understood that she wanted to get him out of there, but he wanted to know who this little angel was. He didn't believe that such a small person could get him out of that hell, and he asked her directly who she was. The girl introduced herself, but Cheshire didn't need her name, so she promised to tell him everything. But first, they had to get out of that gloomy place. She also assured him that if he went with her, his life would be much better than there. Cheshire still looked at the visitor with some distrust. He still thought it was an illusion. Still, he extended his hand towards her, and she was glad that this boy finally found peace. And when she took it, Lilith was even a little surprised at how tightly he clung to her. Then, she began to convince him to go with her, apologizing again for being so late. And she promised that now nothing would cause him pain, and that she would teach those scoundrels a lesson. After this, Cheshire left the small room and then ran down the stairs ahead of Lilith. He simply had very short legs and could now barely keep up with her. And he asked her to wait. Upstairs, Cheshire looked around the corner. There was no one, but they might run into a couple of servants. The girl was not afraid. She is sure that if they see them, it won't be a big deal. The important thing is not to get caught. They moved on. Now she had to leave the key, with which she opened the door to the small room. The one the maid gave her. She had to leave it in the second notch of the window in the adjoining hallway. Finding the correct window, the girl wanted to leave the key, but her short stature didn't allow her to. Cheshire understood what she was trying to do, and, taking her hand, he himself placed the key on the windowsill. The girl was pleased that they were in sync, and now they had to proceed with their plan. Meanwhile, Jonathan was looking for the girl and involved the servants, who suggested looking for her in the street. And there, the young Marquis saw her running alongside his half-brother, whom he hates more than anyone. He was even more surprised that that idiot had escaped, and Lilith, with an innocent face, declared that she had found a new friend. Jonathan was already boiling and demanded they return to the room, but the girl suggested playing hide-and-seek. Then she pushed Cheshire, asking him to flee from there, while the young Marquis ordered the servants to capture him immediately. The servants obeyed the order and ran after the fugitive, but Lilith decided to intervene. But Jonathan immediately grabbed her by the neck, imperatively demanding that she stay still. Then he realized his mistake, let her go, and more kindly asked her to wait there. However, the girl had no intention of doing so. It was the perfect moment to try to escape, but as soon as she took the first step, the young Marquis tripped her. Because of this, the girl collapsed on the floor in an instant, hitting her chin very hard. She now hated Jonathan for treating a little girl with such cruelty. The sound of her fall made Cheshire stop, but the girl shouted at him to run away anyway. But he didn't listen to her at all. Instead, he ran back, passing the servants who were chasing him. Jonathan was stunned, not understanding what was wrong with that idiot, whose eyes were full of fury at that moment. The young Marquis was going to order him back to the small room, but he couldn't because he received a brutal kick to the head. From the blow, he flew away instantly, and Cheshire crouched next to Lilith, who was mumbling about her not having listened to him. The boy didn't say anything to her, simply took her hand, and then something incredible happened. In the blink of an eye, they were on the street, and Lilith understood that he knew how to teleport. And while Jonathan shouted to catch those brats, they kept running. But on foot now. Originally, all abilities belonged to the protagonists, and Cheshire suddenly had time slowing. Now he understood that it wasn't teleportation, he could simply control time. And if he wished, his opponent's movements would be like slow motion. The girl was glad to now have protectors like her dad and Cheshire. Now there was only one small mess left. Meanwhile, the Marquis was telling the Duke about the rumors that had circulated during his absence, but he assured that any father would understand why, and with what intentions Enoch took the little lady away 7 years ago. The Duke, meanwhile, was thinking about his own things. There was no trace of another child in the house. He asked about the children, and the Marquis admitted that there had always been few in his family. Onyx's reaction was predictable, and Enoch knew he had to look for a secret room. To do this, he asked to see the exhibition hall, and the Marquis even agreed to be his guide. At that moment, a cry of distress was heard from Lilith behind the door, and the Duke knew something was wrong. Both men went to see what was happening, as Jonathan's voice could also be heard. Upon opening the door, they saw Lilith and Cheshire running, chased by the young Marquis at full speed. The girl ran to her father, pointing at the boy and pretending that perhaps he had also been invited. Onyx turned pale with anger, but Enoch was intrigued by how the 7-year-old girl had found him, since Cheshire was supposed to be hidden. Lilith, like any child, boasted about her big house with many rooms, in one of which she found a friend. But the Duke knew she was just acting, and he was also worried about the boy's poor condition. Algo no Kudraba. She began to ask, and her daughter confessed that she found him in the basement. That room smells awful and is full of mice. The Marquis, not knowing what to do, began to devise a way out of this compromising situation. But nothing convincing came to mind, and he barely contained his rage that his prisoner was free. What a disaster! Meanwhile, Enoch understood that before him was an illegitimate son, whom Onyx was hiding. What a secret! The atmosphere became more tense, and the Duke asked the Marquis to speak alone. The truth was about to come out. Lilith and Cheshire were sent to wait in another room, and the girl trusted that Dad would solve everything. From her pocket, she took out the ointment that Rachel had given her, along with the key and a note. A mysterious gift. Then the little girl asked Cheshire to lower his head so she could treat his wounds. But he refused. The girl reassured him, telling him it wouldn't hurt at all. She would just put an ointment on the blow. When he agreed, she thanked him for not abandoning her and asked why he had so many wounds. He could have dodged the blows, but the boy took his time to answer. Then he explained that if he had dodged them, he would have only enraged them even more. And he has nowhere to flee, so he has to endure everything in this house, so as not to starve on the street. This young man is only 11 years old, and despite his talents, lacks any legal status. It is difficult to survive in this empire under such circumstances, and Lilith apologized for the nonsense she said. Suddenly, Cheshire spoke about his father. He heard from Jonathan that the Marquis plans to approach the Duke. The girl declared that her dad would never do something like that to those who hit children, and that they came to see the painting. Moreover, she confessed that her real goal was not the work of art, but Cheshire. She proudly proclaimed that she came to save him, and Rachel warned her that he was there. Upon hearing this, the boy became indignant, not understanding why Lilith was looking for him without even knowing who he was. Lilith herself got annoyed, not understanding why he remained so stubborn. Then, she reminded him that they had already met. She was sure he was just pretending not to recognize her. The girl thought about him the whole time and wanted to see him. She didn't need a reason to appreciate him. Smiling happily, the young Duchess confessed that she liked him simply because. At this, Cheshire coldly stated that the girl simply considered him her toy. For that, she would feed him and give him a place to sleep. These words angered Lilith. She spoke with complete sincerity and didn't understand why Cheshire was so skeptical. Then she started to scold him childishly, saying that a person is not a toy, and that he was talking nonsense. With a hand on her heart, the young lady declared that she wished to be his true friend. But Cheshire still didn't believe it. She is the Duke's daughter, and they simply cannot be friends. For a while, they argued a bit about this, and Lilith defended her point of view. At that moment, Enoch Rubinstein approached them and addressed his daughter directly. The girl was happy and ran to him, while the Duke and Cheshire stared at each other. Then Enoch suggested going home. And not just him and Lilith, Cheshire had to go with them too. Once at the mansion, the Duke asked them to wait in the hallway for a bit, as he first needed to speak with the grandfather. He also asked the children to remain silent and tell no one anything, no matter who asked. But before he could enter the office, they saw the twins pass by. Leo and Theo immediately started asking who that boy was, and Lilith introduced him as Cheshire. The Duke approached and explained that he was his daughter's new friend, and that from now on, he would live with them. Leo immediately asked about his family, to which Enoch confessed that he was a commoner. At that moment, Cheshire felt very uncomfortable, as if he were a painting everyone was examining closely. And the Duke again asked everyone to be quiet while he spoke with the grandfather, and reminded them not to tell anyone anything. Meanwhile, Leo noticed how Lilith gently held that boy's hand and felt something strange. Then Enoch left, and Leo grabbed his sister's hand and reminded her of her promise to go spider hunting with him today. The girl hesitated a little, as she wanted Cheshire to go with them too. It seemed this angered Leo, since they were supposed to go spider hunting just the two of them. Lilith didn't understand why Leo was behaving like that today. In the original story, when she met Cheshire, they became close. Now a strong tension filled the atmosphere, which kept increasing. But then Theo intervened, wanting to get to know the guest well, and offered him his hand as a greeting. Leo only made a face at that moment. Then he declared that the boy stank, although Lilith didn't smell anything. Cheshire even started sniffing himself discreetly. The Duke appeared at that instant, heard the last words, and suggested the guest go take a bath. He asked the twins to play with Lilith for a while, and, taking Cheshire's hand, he took him to the bathroom. And Lilith started asking Leo what was wrong with him today, and why he looked at Cheshire so much. On top of that, he made a comment, but even if he stank, there was no need to say it so loudly. So the girl supposed that her brother was acting this way because of the boy's origin. But he insisted that he only said what was true, and that Cheshire smelled bad. Theo decided to end this childish argument, knowing it wouldn't end well. Then, Lilith clarified that this had nothing to do with Cheshire, and that Leo spoke like that to everyone. But the girl didn't calm down, saying it was a bad habit, and demanded that he not behave that way towards her new friend. This only angered Leo more, as he felt his sister had taken the side of a dirty commoner. He even accused her of lying, since she had gone to see a painting, and instead brought a new friend home. Defending Cheshire, Lilith explained that he had nowhere to go, and if Leo had a problem with that, he should tell her. The little boy didn't want to argue much with his sister, and simply turned around, crossing his arms nervously. And then he simply left, and didn't listen to what Lilith was trying to explain to him. It seemed that not even her brother recognized him, and the girl was bewildered, not understanding why everything turned out this way. The Duke recalled the meeting with the Marquis, who asked him to handle the matter carefully. If Cheshire bored the lady or was simply unnecessary, so that no strange rumors would arise. Onyx explained that for nobility like them, reputation is vital, and he hoped Enoch understood that. Now he took Cheshire to the bathroom, and, upon undressing, the Duke was horrified to see bruises all over his body. Still, he didn't touch the delicate subject. He wanted the boy not to be afraid, and even decided to bathe with him. Then he confessed that it had been a year since he bathed with his daughter, because she had grown up. And he felt shy. It was strange for Cheshire to hear that they bathed together before, but after all, they are father and daughter. The Duke decided to show his paternal care again, and soaped the boy's head with shampoo. Suddenly, the boy asked if it was true that the Duke had ordered him killed. This shocked Enoch, and Cheshire confessed that he knew everything and that he only survived because of his daughter. He also saw how the nobility took other commoners away only to throw them out and murder them later. And lowering his eyes swollen from the bruises, the boy also declared that he wanted to ask the Duke for something. Cheshire asked the Duke for some money, promising to leave and not bother when he grew up, and found a job. Enoch noticed that the boy had rehearsed those words a lot, and he was only 11 years old. So, with a reassuring voice, he explained that children do not have to work. He didn't bring the boy here to work, much less to please his daughter. If Cheshire wanted to leave, the Duke would not stop him. He simply couldn't ignore what was happening. Knowing that the boy was still distrustful, Enoch assured him that he could ask for whatever he needed. Some time later, the Duke met with his father, who, after a brief talk, gave him his consent. It seemed strange to Enoch that he agreed so easily, after 7 years of separation. And so many problems, he had even prepared to persuade Nordic, thinking he would object. But the latter reminded him that his son would do whatever he wanted. The old man simply didn't want useless arguments, so he asked his son to resolve everything by himself. Moreover, he noticed that Enoch was much more indulgent. As a child, he argued a lot. The old Duke found it difficult for his son, who always questioned everything, to understand him. Fortunately, Enoch had already grown up and started following the rules, but he never understood the absurdity of the system. In high society, he only felt the duty to obey his father, who always felt guilty about that. Nordic really forced him to obey, and now regrets it, understanding that he shouldn't have done it. If he had known that everything would end in 7 years of absence, he would never have acted that way. After the conversation, Enoch thanked his father for his decision, because if he had been more insistent, everything could have been different. It terrifies him to think that if he had prevailed over the old man back then, the children wouldn't even exist. He is truly grateful to his father, because after the birth of Lilith, his life changed. Enoch understood for the first time that life is worthwhile, and seeing his daughter every day. He understands what happiness is. Now he wants to create the best world for Lilith, although he knows it won't be easy at all. His father encouraged him and promised not to interfere, especially since he has 1 foot in the grave. Nordic allows his son to do as he pleases. Even if Enoch destroys everything, he will not intervene. For a moment, silence reigned in the office, and suddenly the young Duke let out a laugh. Meanwhile, Lilith was drawing with Cheshire, and his abilities seemed amazing to her. I doubt anyone else can look at a book and then draw such an incredible jellyfish. But the boy modestly just said that his talents weren't that great, something the twin girl denied. Then she got curious about why Lilith hadn't drawn the jellyfish herself. If she proposed it. Seeing her drawing, Cheshire explained that it wasn't a jellyfish. The image looked like her father. The girl was surprised, since everyone says it looks like a jellyfish. But her friend thinks differently. Now she can show the drawing to her father without any problems. And Cheshire recalled the Duke's words about his daughter. Enoch believes his daughter is super talented and confessed that she will soon leave to practice. How exciting! The Duke felt uneasy about sending her alone. And if Cheshire went with her, he would be calmer. It would be a relief. But the boy cannot go with her. He has no status. What a drag. And Enoch told him not to worry about that. He will take care of the matter. So the boy shouldn't fret. Cheshire didn't understand such kindness from the Duke. But now he sees that this man with such a high social status is simply incredible. What a surprise. Only one explanation came to his mind. Enoch is good to him because of his daughter, because of little Lilith. And then he asked Lilith if she liked her father. A question that seemed very strange to the girl. But if he is her father, obviously she has to like him. Besides, he is super good and affectionate. A charm. Anyone would like him. Cheshire realized that the question had been foolish. Suddenly, the girl proposed to her friend that he also become the Duke's son, and this left him flabbergasted. Then, she explained that her dad is bad, and that giving her life doesn't mean he is a father. The girl assured him that her dad, without hesitation, would accept Cheshire into his family. But the boy turned away a little, and with a sad voice, declared that he didn't need any family. Then he showed that he had finished his drawing, and asked the lady for permission to go to sleep. Lilith didn't argue with him, but then she was surprised when the boy asked where the servant's room was. It turns out that Cheshire planned to sleep there. It seems his psychological trauma is deeper than it appeared. But Lilith didn't want to discuss it now, and simply took him to her room and laid him down next to her. She watched him for a while. Cheshire fell asleep quickly and very deeply. At least that's what it seemed. Afterwards, she decided to clean his bruises with a handkerchief, hoping her movements wouldn't wake him. Literally before her eyes, the bruises began to disappear from his face. The girl was amazed, thinking it was his ability, but she couldn't forget his words, that he didn't need a family, although she understood that he only said that. In reality, Cheshire dreams more than anyone of a close-knit family, as his mother abandoned him, and his father abused him, and she whispered to him while he slept that she wanted to reveal a secret to him. Then she leaned a little closer and whispered that he was the protagonist of this world. They always face and overcome difficulties, and no matter how much Cheshire suffers. Lilith promised to help him. In a soft but quite proud voice, the girl declared that they would become a family. Having completed this small mission, Lilith felt her own eyes begin to close, and she lay down to sleep. She didn't see how, after that, Cheshire opened his eyes. It turns out he wasn't asleep and had heard everything. The boy turned toward her and observed her for a while, convinced she was a strange girl. He was surprised that Lilith would seek out the marquis and save someone she didn't care about at all. Cheshire thought it was just a whim of a noble girl interested in common people. He felt like a toy, disposable when she got bored, because he had seen many cases like that. But in reality, the boy was happy to finally go to bed without hunger and not wish to die at the hands of his father. And he was willing to take advantage of the fleeting interest of the young noblewoman. At least that's what he thought. Cheshire still couldn't understand why Lilith had said they would become a family. It was strange, and he wished she wouldn't be so kind if she intended to get rid of him. The boy no longer wanted to be hurt like that, and with those thoughts, he turned to the other side and fell asleep. A few minutes later, the door opened. It was the Duke coming to see the children, and he noticed that Cheshire was sleeping uncovered. So he approached and adjusted the blanket so that both children were covered. On the nightstand, Enoch saw a drawing by the boy and knew he drew very well. Then he decided to see what his daughter had drawn, and her masterpiece also looked like a jellyfish to him. But looking closer, he realized that his daughter wanted to draw him, and it would look like him if he fixed the eyes and the nose. And looking at the drawing for a minute, the father admitted that it was a rather cute image. Then the Duke leaned down and kissed his daughter on the forehead, quietly wishing her sweet dreams. The next day, Lilith went to the lesson, where Oscar was present. Through the window, she saw her new friend sitting on the street by the fountain, and her face showed that he was sad. The lesson was very boring. Even Oscar was yawning, and the girl at that moment wanted to play with Cheshire instead of studying. The wizard himself suddenly admitted that it was boring, but he came because he agreed to have a special session with Lilith once a week. The girl decided to ask him a question so that it wouldn't seem so boring and asked him to explain something to her. But Oscar didn't believe her. He is sure that she knows everything and only asks to kill boredom. Then he told her that he would soon go to the academy, although usually one goes there at age 9. Knowing that her birthday is on May 19th, the wizard added that she has less than a month left. But that's not all. The little girl would also have to meet her mother, which greatly surprised Lilith. Her father always told her that her mother had left when she was little, and she never wondered why her father always hid the fact that she still has a mother. In the original story, only the death of the daughter was mentioned. Nothing was said about her mother, so Lilith didn't think about that. Then, the owner of the magic tower declared that Lady Selena is very popular, and Lilith asked him to tell her more. From the girl's reaction, Oscar understood that it was the first time she had heard of her mother, but he hesitated whether to tell her. But the girl was very curious and asked him again to tell her everything. So, Oscar began by saying that Marchioness Selena Ledendorf was a famous mage, retired 5 years ago. Now she researches at the academy, but Lilith was surprised that her mother was a marchioness, not a duchess. Oscar explained that, after Enoch's disappearance, she married Marquis Ledendorf. Moreover, they had a son, and Lilith understood why she had never seen her mother. And Oscar believed that Selena didn't worry much about her daughter, since she formed another family so easily. But Lilith affirmed that she wasn't upset at all, and understood that her mother now had another life. After all, she is young and talented, so she can do whatever she deems necessary. The tower head did not deny that this woman was an excellent mage from a good family. Selena married the Duke, who then had the most power, and he doubted there was love between them. Although Oscar himself thought it was too cruel, even if she didn't love her husband. Abandoning a child is sad. Lilith still believed that her mother didn't know where she was, as her father took her right after birth. Even so, Oscar insisted that Selena was a young mage, and all she did was resign and calmly leave to work at the academy. And then, the tower head declared, with some anger, that it was precisely that woman who revealed to the emperor where Lilith was. And her father, she did that in exchange for his resignation. Moreover, the emperor promised not to send her son to the army. Oscar said this to point out that the little girl's mother sold her own daughter for the well-being of her son. Lilith concluded that this whole tragedy happened because of her mother. In the original story, she was kidnapped and sent to the academy, and after confirming her rank, they locked her up. But since her mother works at the academy, it turns out she knew everything. And in the original story, Selena watched everything from a distance, but kept silent and pretended not to notice. Now Lilith admitted that this story had impacted her a little, and Oscar advised her to, as soon as she arrived at the academy, go directly to the magic tower. He promised to use his influence to place her, but the girl decided it was better to stay home. So the wizard explained that otherwise, Lilith would end up on the battlefield. And there, they do not forgive even children. Young fighters had to fight there with toothed monsters, but Lilith protested, wanting to stay with her dad. But the tower head was surprised to understand that the Duke allowed his daughter to simply live life to the fullest. So Enoch also wants his daughter to live like a princess and not be sent to the battlefield. But the Duke himself could not go to war, as the emperor ordered. Enoch was against the military invasion. However, now he has a daughter, and this gives the emperor the opportunity to intimidate him. Oscar declared that Lilith would become his weak spot, and that he would have to go and kill innocents. Still, the girl still had the chance to protest, but she wanted to know what the tower head's intentions were. He is not a villain, and he doesn't like the emperor, apparently, but something doesn't add up. In the original story, the Duke asked him for help with a coup d'etat, but he refused. When the rebels reached the palace, the tower owner, Oscar, was next to the emperor. Even stranger, that man simply watched the death of His Majesty. Lilith thought that happened before she appeared as the final villainess. Back then, Cheshire tried to kill her on her father's orders, and Oscar was the only one who stopped him. The tower head never used physical force. He fought Cheshire until he vomited blood. Before, Lilith thought they were enemies because she was on the villain's side, and she didn't understand why he decided to help her. Oscar noticed how focused the little girl was and asked her not to frown, or she would get wrinkles. Suddenly, the girl confessed that she couldn't understand what the tower owner was thinking. This surprised Oscar at first, but then he burst out laughing heartily, which in turn surprised Lilith. So she asked him directly why he was so kind to her. In reality, the girl suspected that this man was plotting something, even more so because he blushed instantly. After hesitating a little, the man confessed that he really liked that little girl. Now Lilith was stunned, and Oscar added that he loved geniuses, but he didn't understand why it affected her so much. The girl was simply confused by his words. It's just that she could be misinterpreted, even though they had a huge age difference. Now Lilith understood that Oscar just liked to joke with people, and now she was laughing heartily. Tears even came to her eyes, but then she noticed something through the window. The girl also paid attention to the street and saw that some boys were fighting. Leo threw Cheshire to the ground and started hitting him with his little fists, and fury was visible on his face. Realizing that things were going very badly, Lilith ran out at full speed, and Oscar was left thinking about the girl's words about the age difference. To him, they were nonsense. He saw her quickly heading to separate the boys. Although he understood that she was mature for her age and was simply playing her role wonderfully, Lilith was already reaching the fighting boys, and from afar she started shouting at them to stop. But Leo seemed not to hear her and kept pressuring Cheshire. Only another shout from his sister forced him to stop, and he let go of the boy, hitting him one last time on the jaw. The girl immediately ran towards her friend and started lamenting over him, worried if he was badly hurt. She didn't understand what was happening, since she had promised that she wouldn't let anyone touch him. And now, because of Leo, it turned out she hadn't kept her word, and she demanded an explanation from him. Her brother just glared at Cheshire, as if he were his worst enemy. And then, shouting, he demanded that Lilith not associate with him, because he was a very bad guy. But the girl insisted on an explanation, and Leo, searching for words, almost ground his teeth. Then he shouted that she should simply not play with him, and recalled that he hated arguing about commoners. Lilith thought she had misheard, because anyone could despise Cheshire. But not Leo. On the outside, he is an ass, but he is a good brother who would scold anyone who hurt Cheshire. The girl tried to understand at what point everything went wrong. Maybe she saved him too soon, but now she was disappointed in Leo and told him that she was also a commoner. She was born and lived as a common person, and if she wasn't the Duke's daughter, no one would speak to her. She also had friends from the common people, and she told him about Aunt Susan and Uncle Joe. They are also commoners, and Lilith misses them. She won't be friends just because of nobility. The girl stood in front of Cheshire and proudly declared that he was her friend. Leo must not hurt him. The twin only ground his teeth. If he weren't her brother, he would surely receive a good telling off too. He shouted with fury and jealousy. Lilith had gotten closer to Cheshire than to him. Lilith now understood that it was only childish jealousy. She wanted to explain everything, but she couldn't. So, turning her face away, she declared that she liked Leo before, but hated evil people most of all. Leo was still trembling with rage, and understood how the discussion could end if he continued. So he decided to simply leave without saying a single word. And Lilith returned to Cherish, begging him to tell her where it hurt, but he assured her that he was fine. Then the girl apologized. After all, by bringing him there, she promised that no one would touch him. But Cheshire asked her not to apologize and stated that Leo's action was completely correct. This twin misunderstood him when he came to ask if they were real friends. Cheshire's answer was negative, and upon hearing that, Lilith became more indignant than surprised. But the boy believed he was telling the truth about only being a toy. He thought that if he told Leo that he and Lilith were friends, Leo would hate him. So that is what he said. And now the boy is sure that the twin simply misunderstood his words. That is why he attacked him with punches. Coming from Cheshire's mouth, this sounded like the worst curse to Lilith. Then he added that he wanted to explain himself to Leo, but the latter didn't give him the opportunity. Lilith became very sad. She believed she was to blame for everything herself. On the way from the Onyx mansion, they stopped at a restaurant to eat. There Cheshire promised the Duke that he would take care of his daughter. He promised to feed her and put her to bed, but Enoch didn't understand what that meant. And then Lilith declared to her father that if she couldn't be friends with that boy, she would use him like a toy. But it was just a joke to distract Cheshire from his burden, and now she realized her mistake. Trying to fix the situation, the boy asked permission to say in the future that they were friends. For a moment, Lilith thought about it, and he blushed a little for daring to propose such a thing. But this only made the little girl happy, and with a sweet smile, she asked her friend to promise to do so. Cheshire, still somewhat ashamed, only nodded affirmatively. After a while, Lilith approached Leo's room and heard him explaining why he had an altercation with Cheshire. The girl didn't wait and entered the room, where she saw her younger brother and Aunt Ordia. The aunt realized that the little girl and her brother needed to talk and decided to leave them alone. Lilith began by explaining that she knew why Leo hit his friend. because he called him his toy. With an unfriendly face, Leo confirmed it. No one can go around calling someone a toy just like that. And there the girl clarified that Cheshire meant that he was the toy, not the other way around. Then she admitted that she had called him a toy and that it was just a joke. But apparently she shouldn't have joked like that. She also explained Cheshire's fear, that Leo would hate him if he said he and Lilith were friends. And it made sense, because until recently the twin looked at him strangely, but Leo suddenly denied everything. Immediately afterwards, he admitted that he was jealous of his sister, because she was closer to that boy than to him. But he also understood that he liked him, since she brought him home. And Leo feared that Lilith loved Cheshire more than him. The girl wouldn't even think such a thing. She believed that Leo didn't like Cheshire because he wasn't nobility. Approaching her little brother in bed, the girl explained that this boy was her friend. But with Leo, they were family. But the twin kept turning his face away angrily. He didn't even want to look at his sister, and she confessed that she always only had dad. And before, she envied children with siblings. But then a cool brother appeared who also loves spiders. And throwing herself to hug Leo, Lilith declared that she is very happy now, as she can play with two brothers. Leo is part of her family, and even if she had 100 friends, he will always be more important. This cheered up the twin. He stopped being angry instantly and proposed going to play and eat together. Even so, he was curious to know who was better for Lilith, him, Cheshire, or Theo, and she assured him that he was the best. The girl was happy that this ridiculous situation was clarified, and she hugged her little brother tightly again. The next day, Leo invited Cheshire to his house, and he sat on the throne like an emperor. Even his posture showed greatness, but at the same time, he apologized to the boy for hitting him and explained that he had misunderstood. He also declared that it wasn't Lilith who forced him, but that he himself believes he shouldn't have gotten angry. But Cheshire saw no problem, as he himself said something foolish. Then Leo proposed to get to the point. He wanted to know if Cheshire forgave him for his behavior yesterday. The black-haired boy assured him he wasn't offended, and Leo's face lit up with a smile. Theo, who was lying in bed, explained that his brother speaks strangely, but he is actually a good person. Then he asked Cheshire to make himself at home, and the latter understood that the second twin was sick. Leo immediately blurted out that if Cheshire was going to live there, he would have to get used to the situation. And then, with great pride, he announced that, according to Lilith, he liked him more than anyone. The black-haired boy made a face, as if he had just admitted defeat. Then, Leo added that Lilith loves him even more than Theo, and the second twin was stunned. But Leo kept smiling proudly, asking his brother to ask her himself if he didn't believe him. For her, he is number one, and he hoped there would be no objections to that. But then Theo asked whom Lilith loved more, him or Cheshire. But Leo hadn't asked him. Cheshire himself immediately agreed to take third place, which Theo found a very sweet decision. But to be sure, they should ask Lilith herself, who is now bored in class. Theo found it an excellent idea and started getting out of bed, although his head was still spinning. And as soon as he got up, the pain grew stronger. The boy even fell to the floor, which greatly worried his brother and his friend. Leo ran out to call the servants so they would bring medicine, and Cheshire watched Theo's attack and realized that he was feeling very unwell. What's more, the pain started to spread. Now the boy was having trouble breathing. Then he fell to the floor and started convulsing, as epileptic people usually do. He gripped his neck tighter, as if trying to tear something out from within. Tearing his skin, Cheshire instantly understood that Theo could harm himself, so he grabbed his hands and immobilized them against the floor. Meanwhile, Lilith was walking with her father, and he remembered that her birthday was very soon. He wondered what she wanted as a gift. Enoch was willing to buy anything for his little daughter, and the girl started thinking. Then, she murmured that what she needed probably didn't exist in this world. But then she remembered that the festival was soon, and asked her father to go with her. The Duke remembered that it was the festival in honor of children, and that it would take place very soon. At that festival, children from noble families recite poems and demonstrate their mastery in horse riding. Lilith probably meant the typical children's festival, where all the streets are filled with toy stalls. In addition, there are clowns and puppets with various shows. A paradise for children. Seeing her father pensive, Lilith asked him to pretend he hadn't heard anything, because the grandfather wouldn't like it. She instantly explained that if he went with her, everyone would recognize him and revere him. Lilith was still worried, but the Duke promised that on that day he would impersonate James Brown. They could sneak in secretly, eat delicious food, and he would buy her any shoes she wanted. The girl became very happy and gave her father a little kiss on the cheek in thanks. Suddenly, they heard a heartbreaking scream. They were passing right by the twins' room. At that moment, the Duke knew that Theo was in trouble and he had to check on him, but he didn't want his daughter to see. Suddenly, Lilith started screaming for her father to let her go and to do it now. Before understanding her concern, she slipped out of his arms and ran towards Theo's room. In an instant, she removed the necklace with the monster core, and Enoch saw everything. He recognized its contents by the purple color and became alarmed. It was dark magic. He didn't understand how Lilith had it, but he couldn't ask. She was already running to the room. The servants were lamenting over the boy, trying to comfort him. But nothing worked. The boy screamed as if he were being stabbed with a red-hot knife, convulsing nonstop. His mother barely held back tears, begging him to hold on, that it would end soon. At that moment, Lilith ran into the room, followed by the perplexed Duke. And agitated, seeing the gravity of the situation, the young girl knew she had to hurry before it was too late. Everyone looked at her, begging her not to get too close to the boy. But she ignored everyone and, slipping through the crowd, ran towards her brother. He was still screaming, holding his sister tightly with his hands, and his fingers were squeezing hard. It hurt Lilith a little, but she endured and prayed that her little brother would hold on. She trusted that they would make it. After a few moments, Theo's scream began to fade and his body relaxed. The boy's face was no longer distorted in a horrible grimace of pain. He was returning to normal. And then he saw his sister nearby, holding his hand, and was surprised, not understanding what she was doing there. The maids couldn't believe what they were seeing, that the boy was much better. Theo simply sat up in bed, and immediately his mother ran to him with tears of joy in her eyes. But Leo was a little surprised. He was curious why his brother's attack had ended so suddenly. Theo didn't know, and his mom didn't want to know. For her, the main thing is that her son is fine. Lilith, meanwhile, was sitting to the side, and it seemed to her that something was not right. When hugging her brother, she put a pendant on him. But everyone celebrates, and no one notices the adornment, nor does it seem to matter to them why the convulsions stopped. Not even his own mother noticed that something had changed in her son. Then the Duke approached Theo and asked about his condition. He was also worried about the boy, and was very happy to hear that he was fine now, and that nothing hurt him. Afterwards, Enoch turned to his sister, asking when the attack had started, and she confessed that it was 10 minutes ago. It seemed very strange to the Duke. Normally, the boy suffered an attack for 3 to 4 hours. Lilith decided to clear up her father's doubt, and addressing her little brother, declared that his attack had ended because she prayed. Theo also believed this and tried to give the stone back, but the girl squeezed it in her little brother's hand. The girl confessed that she had been very scared for him, but the important thing is that he is fine now. And Enoch noticed the pendant and asked where she got it. Then Lilith confessed that Theo had bought it for him. The mother's voice made the boy flinch, and Lilith remembered that this object was very expensive. And immediately, she explained to her aunt that she really wanted that shiny thing and asked her not to scold Theo. Ordia promised not to scold her son, and the Duke suggested calling a priest to examine the little one. He suspected that his attack ended quickly thanks to that pendant, and clarified that it was not an accessory, but concentrated magic. The priest then explained that the clash of forces was relieved by the high level of magical power in the body. And then the Duchess understood that if Theo carried that object with him, he would no longer have attacks. The clash of energies is based on the balance between divine and magical force, and one of the sides usually has an advantage. The magical energy from the monster's heart raises the level of magical power, and the clash stops. The grandfather worried whether such a remedy would help, since the boy had been suffering for years, and the priest confirmed it. However, no one knew that demonic energy could affect him in that way. The balance of power will return until there is a permanent cure. It's better to wear that pendant. The priests have been worried about this chronic illness for a long time, and now they see an opportunity to overcome it. Remembering that the Duke called him, the priest asked how he knew about this healing method. Enoch did not want to involve his daughter in this, and explained that it was a simple coincidence. He clarified that Lilith was wearing the pendant like a toy, and when she went with him to see Theo, the latter improved. So the priest decided it was God's will, and that he had heard the young girl's prayers. Meanwhile, Enoch looked at his daughter as if he had a serious conversation pending with her. A little later, Cheshire decided to go see how Theo was. He was intrigued by that strange illness. He was not part of the family and doubted if they would tell him anything, so he lowered his hand without knocking. On his way back, he didn't understand why his normal child was worried about such problems. As soon as he took a few steps, the door opened and Lilith and Leo called him, and his mother was with them. Leo understood that Cheshire was coming to see Theo, and the girl instantly explained that her little brother was resting. And Lady Ordia noticed the black-haired boy, realizing that the Duke had brought him home. The Duchess learned from Leo that Cheshire helped Theo until the servants arrived, and she expressed her huge gratitude. Then she noticed bruises on his face, which hadn't completely disappeared yet, and she became worried. But the boy assured her that everything was fine. Then the Duchess ordered the servants to help this boy and do everything possible for his wounds to heal quickly. But Cheshire himself thought that all the people in this mansion were a bit strange. Lilith remembered they had apple puree for dessert today and invited her aunt to join. Ordia couldn't refuse this lovely girl, and she also declared that Cheshire and his father would come. Suddenly, Leo shouted as if he had been burned because Lilith hadn't said his name, and she reassured him, telling him that he was also invited. Seeing those adorable children, Ordia suggested setting the table outside. The weather is perfect. Lilith loved the idea. It had been so long since she ate outdoors. At that moment, the girl noticed Cheshire's slightly confused look, but instantly, he burst out laughing. Did he realize it would be his first time? Cheshire still didn't understand why the little girl was so happy and became worried. His hand was trembling, so Lilith took his hand and led him to show him where they would enjoy dessert. 4 days later, a festive atmosphere reigned in the Duke's mansion. Lilith was happy because they found the cure for Theo's illness, which tormented him. Now, Uncle Anthracite, who sought the medicine abroad, can finally return to the capital. The little girl understood that everything was thanks to her and even felt some pride. While she and her brother were romping on the silky green grass, he remembered that his birthday was soon. He also asked what to give her as a gift. But for Lilith, the best gift was that her brother was better. At that moment, Leo was watching them. He found it a bit strange to see these two spending so much time together. Suddenly, he became curious to know where Cheshire had gone, and immediately answered. As if waiting for the question, Lilith immediately noticed the black-haired boy, and jumping up, ran to greet him. She handed him a small canteen of water, and praised him for how hard he had worked today. The Duke decided to take Cheshire under his tutelage, so that the children could attend classes together. They only had 2 different lessons. Lilith had special classes with Oscar, and Cheshire learned swordsmanship with his father. If he started training now, he could become a sword master 2 years earlier, which made Lilith happy. The girl asked Cheshire to come a little closer, reminding him that they had something planned today. The boy, strangely embarrassed, suggested that she go with the master, even though he had promised to accompany her. And Leo, suddenly, became furious because they were whispering things he wasn't told. Cheshire's words gnawed at him. Lilith urged her brother to ignore him, but he insisted, although he couldn't squeeze the answer out of him. What tension! After a while, the little girl and Cheshire left with their father, who took the form of James Brown. How unexpected! The boy remained restless for a while, although the Duke assured him that today would only be fun. Could he trust it? They arrived at the fair, where the joyful bustle of the people could be heard from afar. The excitement was palpable. Cheshire was seeing something like this for the first time and began to observe everything attentively. His eyes shone, and Lilith, from his gaze, understood that he loved it and was silently happy for him. What a sweet moment! In the original story, the Duke came here only with Cheshire, a moving episode that Lilith would never forget. There was no warm relationship between Enoch and that boy, because after the death of his daughter, he became terribly cold. In reality, the Duke worried about Cheshire and awkwardly tried to be a father to someone who never knew paternal love. And now, Lilith was very happy that they could all come to the festival together. She immediately thanked her father for the opportunity to have fun like this. Then she turned to Cheshire, hoping that he too was comfortable, and he just nodded his head. Suddenly, Lilith noticed a man with black hair and red eyes approaching a little further away. He was accompanied by several soldiers, but the girl recognized that it was Uncle Axion. This man approached the Duke, who was in the form of James, and asked what he was doing there. Axion was also that captain who had gone to the town to deliver a message from the emperor. Enoch addressed him, but a soldier immediately corrected him, reminding him that he was facing an important person. Lilith decided to intervene to ease the tension a bit, and greeted the captain with a lovely, childish little voice. The man only glanced at her, remembering how smug she had been last time, but then he asked his soldier to calm down, explaining that Mr. Brown was his friend. He was curious why he was acting so carelessly around here, as if he wanted to sink his reputation even further. Enoch was interested in what Axion was doing there, and the latter explained that he was conducting an investigation. Lately, reports of disappearances of commoner children had increased, so the captain came to take a personal look. It seemed to Lilith that there was nothing more useless than crime reports among common folk. The commoner's territory exists in complete anarchy, and they only investigate when nobles are involved. And a noble who uses his power to investigate something in this rotten world is simply a miracle. The captain only asked the Duke to take care of his reputation, reminding him that the ceremony would be the day after tomorrow. After that, Axion was about to leave, but Lilith unexpectedly stopped him. The girl said nothing, just took his hand and placed a small candy in his palm. Only then did she explain that it was a refreshing candy, and that if he ate it, he would regain his strength. The man thanked her, and upon leaving reflected on the simple, yet kind gesture from the girl, and the Duke with the little ones decided to move on to enjoy all the wonders of the festival. They saw that a prize was being raffled, Princess Lara's shoes, and everyone was invited to participate. It was an object from the story Princess Lara's Adventures, and it was a huge trend in the Empire. Last year, Lilith also wanted those shoes very much, but they were too expensive. The second prize was a rabbit pajama. The Duke suggested participating, but his daughter said she no longer liked Princess Lara. Despite everything, the Duke thought it was a sign from heaven and headed towards that stall. Even though Lilith tried to dissuade him, they turned out to be the last participants, and the Duke introduced himself as James Brown. The contest presenter started writing down his name, and the girl's name when he saw the boy standing next to them. And he declared that the event was for all children, and they should not exclude Mr. Brown's son. It's the rule. All children must participate, even their mothers, as they will have to lift and hold the children. Lilith realized that her dad would have to carry two at once, and exclaimed that it wasn't fair. But those are the rules, and just as Cheshire was about to clarify that he was not that man's son, the Duke immediately lifted him and sat him next to his daughter on his shoulders. The girl waited for everything to go well, when suddenly a huge shadow covered them. A simply gigantic man approached, holding a small girl in his arms. He noticed that the other father had brought two children at once, and wished him luck in the competition. The Duke complimented him on his excellent physique, and the man courteously shook his hand. Lilith looked at his huge fist, and knew that such a blow would turn anyone into puree. The first trial began. The parents had to do squats with their children on their backs, until 5 teams remained. That guy named Billy noticed Brown's good stamina, believing it was due to his youth. And the girl whispered words of encouragement to her father, so he could win. When the second round started, it was time to sit down and stand up, but the presenter decided to raise the stakes. First, the parents had to spin 9 times, and then lift their child. Cheshire didn't understand the point of all this, and Lilith explained that now it was a matter of honor, and there was no turning back. Seeing that the girl was even more determined than the Duke, the boy could only sigh heavily. Meanwhile, the captain continued investigating, and suspected that, amidst all the revelry, someone was preparing a kidnapping. In the last month, more than 20 children had disappeared, whose main characteristic was fair skin and fine features. Those children sell well to the nobility, and the captain had a portrait of the suspect. Axion asked his men if they had run into that guy by chance. They couldn't give the captain good news, and showed uncomfortable faces. It occurred to him that they were probably accepting bribes and turning a blind eye. Then, in a threatening voice, he declared that he would punish those soldiers if they didn't catch the scoundrel today. They will be held responsible, and the soldiers ran off to fulfill their duties. Left alone, the captain folded the sheet with the suspect's image several times. And then, to his surprise, he realized that he was still holding the candy Lilith had given him. He recalled her words, that this refreshing candy gave strength, and then he noticed that his complexion had improved a lot since their last meeting. Before, she looked like a doll. He even remembered his father a little. However, now the captain was beginning to understand why people have children. Then he imagined a disgusting guy, with a horrible scar on his face, kidnapping the child. For some reason, he compared it to the Duke, who saw the gates of hell after his daughter was taken hostage. But immediately, Action decided that he was simply getting old, because atypical things started to worry him. A little later, the finalists for the contest were 2 fathers, the Duke, of course, And that giant wardrobe. The presenter asked the audience to support them with applause. Everyone applauded, even Cheshire, lurking among the children. In the final round, the rules are very simple. 5 children are hidden in 5 boxes on the stage. The presenter will ask questions, which both the father and the child must answer, and they have to guess the box. The children's voices would be modified with a balloon, but the Duke did not doubt that he would win. Then Billy addressed him, stating that he would not give up the victory so easily, since his daughter also knew him very well. In the remaining boxes are children whose parents have already been eliminated, and the presenter moved on to the first question, which was to answer what Dad's favorite food is, something that seemed like child's play to Enoch. Each of the children shouted different dishes, including beer and carrot puree. The big guy was the first to volunteer, sure of knowing the answer, and asked for the box to be opened. They allowed him, and he reached his huge hand towards one of the boxes, but the Duke stopped him immediately. Billy didn't understand what was happening, and even thought this man was just going to hinder him. Enoch only asked to ask one more question, as it would be sad to part so quickly. He declared that they were comrades now, but this only made the big guy laugh. However, he agreed to continue, and, raising his hand, asked the presenter to ask another question. Meanwhile, the Duke took the opportunity, and approaching the box, apologized to the princess. He simply didn't understand the answer. The next question was, what size was Dad's foot? Enoch understood this would be a bit harder, but he trusted his girl would manage. 2 answered that they didn't know. One said size 14, and the other 2 size 4. It is very likely that size 14 belongs to Billy, and his daughter said it, and size 4, the one who is already disqualified. There, Enoch realized that his daughter didn't even know his shoe size, even though they had visited so many shops together. Billy just laughed and asked again to open the box, and quickly headed towards them. He opened the lid, and his daughter emerged from it, extremely happy, celebrating that they had won. And the Duke was still on the side, watching these 2 rejoice over each other, believing the victory was theirs. Now it was his turn to open the box, but he had to choose one of the 2 and couldn't make a mistake. For that, Rubinstein planned to use a bit of his power, and even started concentrating mana in his fist. And as he began to open the box, he decided that everything should be fair after all. Upon removing the lid, he saw a small boy inside looking at him with terrified eyes. The presenter, meanwhile, congratulated Billy and his daughter with admiration. The proud winners. Then Billy shook his rival's hand, inviting him to a nearby pub and promising him a beer. The Duke promised he would definitely go there sometime, and with that they said goodbye. One box remained closed, and without opening it, Enoch asked if his daughter was very disappointed. And then he opened that box too. But to his surprise, there was another boy inside. The girl sitting there immediately jumped up and ran to her mother, who had come to pick her up. Afterwards, the Duke started opening the next box, believing his daughter would surely be there. But another surprise awaited him. A strange boy. Enoch didn't understand what the hell went wrong. The last box remained. Lilith must be there. The Duke reached out his hands towards it, but before opening it, Cheshire ran and uncovered it himself. It was another boy. Lilith wasn't there. She was never there. Where had she gone? Enoch caught up with him and grabbed his arm, demanding to know where his daughter was. The other swore he knew nothing, but the Duke was boiling with rage. They had tricked him. The guy broke free with an unfriendly look and walked away. What audacity! But he didn't get far. The Duke grabbed him again. You don't mess with him. He wanted his daughter. The man screamed that the participant lost her during the contest and called the guards for help. 2 sturdy men approached, ready to arrest the aggressor. Things were getting ugly. Enoch remembered the talk with the captain about kidnappings, something people report daily. Children disappear without the guard noticing. Although they haven't done anything significant in a while, the Duke has been absent for 7 years, and the captain told him the place had become horribly corrupt. But just because they are defenseless commoners doesn't mean they have to put up with it. Far from it. The Duke saw that nothing had changed and decided to deal with those guards. Immediately, and while they lay on the ground, groaning from the blows, Enoch, with an unfriendly look, went towards the ringleader. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed him by the neck as if he were a rag doll, and lifted him off the floor. His voice became so furious that the poor man's blood ran cold, as the Duke questioned him about his daughter. The ringleader swore he knew nothing, so Enoch only had one option left. Only one. Using a magic trick, he returned to his true form, and the man saw Rubinstein before him. In person. He felt his guts tremble with fear and rise up to his throat, and he promised to tell everything. Indeed, just as suspected, the powerful duke's daughter was kidnapped and caged like a hamster. And during the kidnapping, they put her in a sack. But what worried her the most was that Cheshire was okay. An unknown man approached and, in a rough voice, asked her why she hadn't even cried. It was that guy with an ugly scar on his face, named Jarek, the same one whose composite sketch the captain had. He took out a dagger and lightly ran his tongue over the blade, hoping to instill even more terror in the girl. Lilith decided to play along and declared that she was very scared and begged him to release her. But the kidnapper refused and even threatened that she would never return home again. She will have to live somewhere else and must not resist. The man is sure that one day she will thank him for it. He will hand her over to a great house, where they promise to feed her well and love her. And Lilith understood that he was a human trafficker. So this guy is fully involved in the case Captain Action is investigating. If Lilith were truly a child of humble origin, she would never have escaped from here. All that remains is to wait for Daddy to arrive. At that instant, another bald and fat guy entered. He started rushing Greg, because the captain of the Knights is near, and the atmosphere heated up. Moreover, the Duke got involved, but the bald man doesn't understand why someone like that cares about commoners. Greg suggested giving the girl to Count Blyman. They will get 10 million for her. But the bald man thinks it's better not to attract attention. He asked his partner to go to the port. A ship is waiting there. Lilith understood they were going to send her abroad, and gripped by panic, she shouted for them to wait. The fat man looked at her, and upon examining her better, he realized she was very pretty. Then he told Greg they shouldn't kill her, so she will go with him and they will sell her abroad. Understanding that she needed to buy time until Daddy arrived, Lilith begged them just to let her go. She assured them it would be better for themselves, because her dad would arrive soon. But then she thought about what would happen if she confessed she was the daughter of Duke Rubinstein. She doubted they would believe her, and if they did, it wouldn't improve anything. They had already shown themselves, so she had almost no chance of survival. Because if they let her go, they would condemn themselves to certain death, and no villain wants that for themselves. So to stay alive, these scoundrels would have to kill the girl without hesitation. Noticing that the little one had gone quiet, Greg demanded she say who her father was. He himself was curious, and then she declared that he was someone very terrifying, and that when he appeared, they would have a very bad time. The bandits first looked at each other and then burst out laughing, but Lilith didn't find it funny at all. Deep down, she feared her dad might be late, but then they started preparing to take her with them. The girl didn't know what to do and was very scared. After all, she is just a little girl. The Greek man grabbed the cage, while his partner told him to leave through the back door. Lilith begged them to stop again, but no one had the slightest intention of listening to her. And the bald man, hearing a noise behind the door, went to open it, thinking it was one of his accomplices. But Duke Rubinstein was there, and the bandit, scared by the surprise, asked what he needed. But Enoch immediately noticed another scoundrel behind him, holding a cage with his daughter inside. Lilith also saw her dad and started calling him, hoping he would free her immediately. At the same time, she burst into tears. They were tears of joy and pain. She was scared, but happy to be rescued. And the Greek man only laughed, because the little girl said her dad was capable of scaring anyone. The bald man recognized the Duke and mocked him, saying he couldn't take the girl, that they wouldn't hand her over just like that. Behind his back, he was already preparing the dagger, asking why her father hadn't defended her sooner. Lilith noticed the glint of the blade and immediately warned her father to be careful. But Enoch was also quite experienced in this and instantly intercepted the bandit's hand with the dagger. The fat man didn't expect that reaction and was momentarily paralyzed with astonishment. And the Duke twisted his arm behind his back, almost breaking it. But the bandit felt horrible pain. Then Enoch threw him aside like a sack and prepared to enter that dimly lit place. Lilith just watched her father's movements. She was amazed by his speed. She even stopped crying. The scoundrel prepared to fight the intruder and threw the cage to the floor, making Lilith's body vibrate. Then the bandit started to growl at the Duke, assuring him that he couldn't beat him. And he also pulled out a dagger. What's more, he boasted that even after all this fuss, he would continue living in luxury. But the very next moment, Enoch appeared in front of him like lightning and snatched the weapon away. What's more, he struck the wretch's wrists so hard that the bones shattered instantly. With his hands hanging like puppets, the bandit fell to the floor and began to scream in pain. He couldn't understand how it was possible to break both arms with a single blow. And the Duke wasted no time. He grabbed the scoundrel by the neck and began to strangle him, not letting him utter a sound. His next move was to throw the bastard onto his back and start crushing him against the floor. Lilith, meanwhile, watched her father's actions with some admiration. Although his strength also scared her, she was a little scared to see how he pressed the bandit's throat against the floor, as if trying to crush her. Enoch wanted to give him a good punch to the jaw, but he had no time for games, so he used mana, concentrated it in his hands, and placing his palm on the wretch's forehead, he knocked him unconscious. Now all that remained was to free his beloved daughter, and he headed towards the cage. The cage was locked, and it took effort to open it. Meanwhile, the Duke began to apologize to his daughter for allowing this. And to free her quickly, Enoch used magic again, and the lock instantly opened in his hands. Opening the door, he prepared his arms to hug the little one, for whom he had been so scared. The girl ran to him and started crying again, but now out of happiness because Daddy had rescued her. She begged him not to apologize, but the Duke couldn't. He felt guilty. Lilith herself started asking for forgiveness, thinking she shouldn't have asked him to go see that festival. But Enoch believed the fault was his and all the adults for not giving the children a better life. And he felt very sorry that they lived in such a horrible world. With the child in his arms and taking the form of James Brown again, the Duke went towards the captain. Cheshire had stayed with Action the whole time, and Lilith was glad her friend was okay. But Enoch was a little surprised to see him there, since when he fought the leader, the boy ran out. It turns out that, upon learning the location, he went straight to see the captain. The Duke admitted he was worried about the boy, as he had to stay alone. And he apologized, but Cheshire was the one who apologized. He felt guilty for not being able to help free Lilith. Enoch was even a little taken aback. For some reason, everyone felt guilty now. Then he asked Action about the gang, and the latter affirmed that they had already been caught, and that there was nothing to worry about. After saying goodbye to the captain, the Duke headed home, but on the way he saw Billy, and bodies scattered around him. They were more bandits, and the big guy immediately asked if the girl had been hurt. He was so disgusted by those scoundrels that he wanted to beat them non-stop, and Enoch thanked him, praising his magnificent muscles again. About the sleeping girl, he explained that she was just tired after all she had been through. Billy was glad she was okay, but saddened that his children still couldn't walk the streets peacefully. This same problem worried the Duke, but at the moment, he didn't know how to solve it. Suddenly, the big guy remembered something and pulled a pair of little shoes from his huge pocket, like the ones that were the prize in the contest. He didn't know if they would fit her well. He bought them with the money he had won. The Duke even laughed. He was glad his daughter received such a gift, and Billy reminded him to stop by the bar. Enoch promised that he would definitely pay him a visit for a beer sometime. The news of the kidnapping of the Duke's daughter reached the Emperor, who instantly flew into a rage. She is Enoch Rubinstein's daughter, his treasure, in whom they have invested 7 years. The servant reported that Axion was investigating, and all the culprits were arrested and punished, but the Emperor objected and ordered it to be broadcast that those rascals would remain under imperial surveillance. This surprised the servant. His Majesty declared that the scoundrels must be taught a lesson before dying. Besides, Action cannot lay a finger on them. If they are of noble birth, he ordered the servant to find all the nobles involved and punish them, but he noticed he was surprised again and explained that the Honorable Mr. Rubinstein would appreciate that and is probably furious about what is happening. The Emperor declared that he must follow him and show sincerity. In the Duke's mansion, Lilith woke up when the sun was already high and brightly illuminating the room. Screaming in fright, the girl jumped in bed, not understanding how she could have slept so long. Instantly, the maids rushed in, as if they were waiting for her to open her eyes. They were happy she finally woke up and asked if anything hurt. But the girl asked about her father and what had happened to Cheshire, hoping her friend wasn't hurt. Enoch was with her recently, but he had to leave. He probably went to take care of yesterday's business. And Cheshire is fine. He sat there all night and couldn't sleep. We had to take him out and put him to bed. The girl sighed in relief, but immediately became interested in something else. A little worried, she asked if everyone knew what had happened. She was most worried about her grandfather. The maids hesitated, but asked her not to worry, assuring her that the great lord still didn't know anything. They themselves only know that something happened to the lady, and only know what the boss told them. By boss, they probably meant Rico. Then the maids offered Lilith a bath. She accepted, and she also learned that the boss got worried when the young lady went to play yesterday because children were disappearing. Now the little one understood, but immediately remembered that this was a secret. And Yeti apologized, but her duty was to report on every move of the members of this family. Besides, her boss assigned his own man, even though the Duke was with the children. It doesn't imply that he couldn't save her. An unforeseen situation could simply have occurred. The girl declared that her dad is an excellent swordsman and that he would notice any pursuit. But Jun objected, as his man followed the Duke all the way, but was not detected. They even shook hands and exchanged a few words. But the master suspected nothing. Lilith remembered that the only one her dad shook hands with was that giant, and she couldn't believe it. But in any case, it's good that that big guy is on Rico's side. And June added that they would have intervened if something went wrong. So Lilith asked them to convey her enormous gratitude to the boss. After that, June applauded and reminded the little young lady that it was time to get ready. Taking the little one in her arms, the maid assured that today the young lady would be the most beautiful. A short while later, Rico received a letter from Lilith, to which she attached another portion of antidote. The girl asked how that person who needed the medicine was doing and hoped they were better. She also asked not to necessarily send a reply, just that if everything went well, she should draw a circle on the letter. Likewise, the girl asked what he knew about the man Joseph Lutman, who lived on the islands. She wanted to know where that man was now. In return, she would give Rico interesting information. Rico remembered that man, who 2 years ago was a prominent figure, a political genius, in whose eyes one could read a well of power and the art of choosing talented people. His political skills were well known in the political world. He was very cunning. However, he disappeared 2 years ago, and Rico began to think about how to find him. At that moment, Billy entered. He offered him a drink, and the boss first thanked him for the good fight yesterday. Billy was just glad. He could finally punish the wicked calmly, but he wondered if the Duke was chosen on purpose. After all, Rico himself wanted to contact him, and he ordered the muscular man to protect the princess. Then, the boss admitted that the young lady had helped him with something, but he doesn't know which Duke, because he hasn't met him. And Billy declared that he is an excellent guy, and from his look, you can see he is a decent person. And then, he added that the return of the Duke to the Rubinstein family is simply a divine revelation. The Red Falcon was looking for someone who could bring about a revolution in the rotten empire. But not everyone was capable. The revolution could only be made with the forces of the nobility, which is why they sought the Rubinstein family. But Rico was dumbfounded when Princess Lilith visited him with a proposal. Now even he believed it was an unexpected blessing. Billy warned that it wouldn't be easy. The Duke didn't seem to be a greedy man. It is obvious that only force can achieve a revolution. And Enoch lost his political touch in 7 years. His current political position is like that of a baby, without contacts or idea of what is happening. He will have to work hard for Duke Rubinstein to react soon. Suddenly, Rico put down his cup as if illuminated. Lilith was interested in Mr. Lutman. For some reason, the boss reviewed everything and understood that Enoch probably needed this. It is still unknown what the young lady is plotting, but Rico is increasingly convinced that he understands everything. Meanwhile, the maids fluttered around Lilith, getting her ready and combing her hair. When everything was ready, Jetty and Jun gasped in amazement. They couldn't believe so much beauty. They offered her a look in the mirror. The little girl approached the huge mirror, and upon seeing her reflection, couldn't believe it was herself. She stood in front of the mirror for a while, very happy. After all, she was the protagonist's daughter. And while she admired herself, the maids remained ecstatic, completely hypnotized by her beauty. Then the little one started to laugh, and her laughter infected the maids, who wouldn't stop praising her beauty. And Lilith thought that if she put a little more makeup on her face, she would look a bit older and even prettier. She asked the maids to paint her lips red, but they insisted she was already very beautiful. Furthermore, it wasn't good to paint one's lips just like that, because, according to them, makeup spoils the skin. Looking at the clock, Yeti realized that a lot of time had passed, and they still had to call Tio. Immediately, asking the little young lady to wait, the maid set off to get the boys. It was an event day. Ordia had planned a tea party with noble ladies from aristocratic families. She also invited her daughters and sons. Surely, the aunt wants to introduce Lilith to people her age. Originally, there were no tea parties or high society events in the story. Now, for the girl, this was not a novel but reality, where she is the daughter of Duke Rubinstein, and she decided to show the dignity proper to a noble family and consolidate her position in society. The maids had already left, and Lilith was waiting in her room when she looked at the dresser again. In an instant, the girl was in front of a small table, looking at herself in the mirror, thinking something was missing, so she decided to add a touch of lipstick, believing she could easily wipe it off if she didn't like it. First, she started applying powder with a soft brush on her cheeks and nose, without much success. In her past life, she was very busy and never wore makeup, and when she finished applying makeup, it seemed to her that the result was spectacular. Now, the girl believes she really looks a bit more adult. At that moment, Cheshire knocked on her door, asking permission to enter, as he knew she was already awake. And when the boy entered, he was speechless seeing what that little girl had transformed into. It wasn't just a lot of makeup on her face. She didn't understand why Cheshire was staring at her. At that moment, the twins peeked through the door, not understanding why the others were hesitating. And they were also amazed. Their sister looked like an octopus, and in the end the maids helped remove all the makeup. Cheshire, trying to cheer her up, assured her she looked very beautiful, without any cosmetics. He even admitted that he didn't think it looked as bad as she had put it on, so the little one wouldn't feel so bad. However, Cheshire is not one to know how to lie. He always squints when doing so. That's what the original said. Leo continued to mock her, saying his sister looked like a witch. Only Theo remained calm. Then, leaning towards Lilith, he assured her that today she was the most beautiful. But the little girl remained sulky. Leo wasn't very keen on this tea. He was curious to see Lady Valerina. And besides, the weather was nice. At that moment, they saw how young Lady Valerina approached them, along with another boy. Leo instantly became indignant that she arrived so quickly. But then an idea occurred to him. Grabbing his brother, Leo asked him to quickly swap earrings, which were what distinguished them. Theo complained a little, but didn't argue with his brother, and they instantly swapped the jewelry. The young lady approaching immediately hugged Theo, thinking he was her brother. And Lilith understood why Leo needed to do this, because now it's hard to tell who is who. Erica Ballerina herself was very beautiful, like a doll. She is already 12 years old and looks quite grown up. Suddenly, the little one felt sadness. She was just a miniature next to her. She noticed Cheshire's look towards Eric. Could it be that he liked her? He didn't confirm it, but Lilith insisted. The Countess was imposing, and with a melancholic voice, recalled the recent nickname of witch. Although Cheshire didn't say it, he longed to grow up soon. Knowing it was impossible, Lilith just sighed. Cheshire wanted to speak, but retracted it. He asked for it to be disregarded. Erica approached, and they greeted each other sweetly. There were even compliments. The ballerina lady saw Cheshire and asked who he was. She had never seen him. Theo explained instantly. Her uncle took in the boy, and he looked after him. Erica noticed that Leo was very kind today. She didn't know it wasn't him. Realizing her mistake, Theo shouted that she was being foolish and called her silly. Now he looked a lot like Leo, which pleased Erica, and she hugged him again. Lilith confirmed that this girl likes bad boys, and then noticed the strange look of another boy. Then he greeted, and the real Leo started grumbling that nobody expected that guy there. Nevertheless, the boy greeted Lilith, and then explained that he was Damon, from the Martini Count's family. That name sounded very familiar to the girl, and digging a bit in her memory, she recalled. He was a common supporting character, who was now surprised that the Duke's family had taken in a commoner. It seemed like a mean attitude to her, but still, she introduced herself politely. Suddenly, that boy asked if she knew the rules of etiquette, since she had lived among common people for a long time. Leo, upon hearing this, cursed under his breath, but the young Count heard him and noticed that he didn't look much like Theo. And then he let out that those brothers are noble-born, but have no idea about etiquette. Anyway, Martini was delighted with the news and started interrogating Cheshire about his family. Leo approached and asked him for calm, but he kept insisting why the Duke needed that. And there he said it, that the black-haired boy is just a toy for that family, specifically for Lilith. But he thought Cheshire was lucky and advised him to try hard not to disappoint the Duke. After that, the young Count proposed that they get to know each other better over a cup of tea. Erica happily agreed to this, and without letting go of the fake Leo, dragged him with her. And Lilith took Cheshire's hand, as there was no other choice but to go to the damn tea. Just as they took a step, the young Count stopped them and declared that the commoner would not go with them. Common folk are different from the nobility, and it would be rude of him to sit at the table with aristocrats. The real Leo instantly intervened, demanding an explanation furiously, hoping it was a joke. He even wanted to teach the rude brat a lesson, in the traditional style. But Cheshire held him by the arm. Leo didn't understand why he did it, if they had insulted him, and the insolent one deserved a good correction. But Cheshire said he had to go to class, and started saying goodbye quickly. Immediately afterwards, the boy left in the opposite direction, without even listening to Lilith trying to stop him. Then the girl looked at the little scoundrel, and she too felt like setting his jaw straight. At the tea location, the table was literally overflowing with all sorts of appetizers and delicacies. Meanwhile, the young count spent half an hour boasting about how he won the cup in last year's equestrian competition. Then he asked the twins and Lilith if they were going to participate in the upcoming competitions. But Leo replied that they would stay home, and the young count insinuated mockingly again that they were simply scared. The other boys, affirming that Mr. Martini was unbeatable, wouldn't even try to win. A girl then asked if the princess would participate and in which category she would compete. The young count repeated that he was the only winner, but he wanted to see Lilith in the competition. Erica, observing the second twin, didn't understand what was wrong with Tio today. Meanwhile, Lilith, not wanting to give in to the count, decided to participate, but she would play by his rules. Many minor villains will grind their teeth when they see Martini's defeat, and she will compete with Cheshire. Shortly after, accompanied by the Duke, Lilith and Cheshire arrived at the stable, where the racehorses were. The boy still doubted whether he could participate, but Enoch assured him that everything would turn out great. And then, little Cheshire promised to try hard not to disappoint the Duke. Rubinstein was also sure that he would succeed, and then they continued on their way. But Lilith remembered the manga rule: the protagonist never comes in second. That's why she believed that, even though Cheshire had never ridden, the victory would be theirs. These trials would put that conceited boy in his place and spread her friend's talent. The Duke offered his daughter the choice of a horse, and she thought of a normal one for Cheshire to win. But upon entering the stable, she saw a beautiful white horse, adorned with flowers. The girl loved the horse, and she told her father that she would ride her. Then the stable boy arrived, having learned about the competition, and said that this horse was useless. It was Zephyr, the horse that defeated young Lord Martini in the last trials. The girl was a little surprised and asked why Zephyr was there, and if he had an owner. The stable boy explained that the horse had injured itself during training, and although almost healed, could not compete. What's more, racehorses are not even sold, they are simply gotten rid of. The last sentence resonated horribly with Lilith. Those horses are sent straight to the slaughterhouse. She didn't understand why such beauty would be killed if the animal wasn't to blame for anything. Her father explained that they had no other option, because that horse was only generating losses. The girl felt very sorry for Zephyr and wanted to take her. Besides, she wasn't aiming for victory. Seeing his daughter's pleading eyes, the Duke couldn't resist and ended up agreeing. He informed the stable boy that they were taking that mare, so his little one could learn to ride. Then the stable boy warned him that the mare was still very attached to her former owner, and she wouldn't obey. They tried to take her away, but she wouldn't allow anyone to approach, and that was too dangerous for a young lady. But Lilith kept insisting, remembering that in competitions, magic helped children not to fall, and in general, she loved that little horse. The girl was saddened that she would die if they didn't take her. The father's heart couldn't resist his beloved daughter's pleas, and he agreed to take that beast. After that, the Duke decided to explain the rules a bit to Cheshire, stating that posture is the most important thing when riding. The head and back must be kept straight, but without tensing up too much. And while Enoch was telling the boy the subtleties, Lilith was worried, although she trusted that her friend would succeed. Then, the Duke asked her to wait a little while in the spot, because he needed to hold Cheshire while he rode. The girl nodded, and then looked towards the fence where Zephyr had been brought. That horse was still cautious, and it was very difficult to bring him here. Lilith asked the horse not to worry, because she wasn't going to ride, and she didn't care about the competitions. The girl didn't know if the horse understood her, as it simply turned its head to the side. But she hoped so. She also understood that Marshmallow missed her former owner, which is why she wouldn't let anyone approach her. The horse snorted in annoyance at this, as if it understood what they were talking about. And then Lilith decided that she would win Marshmallow's trust in the 2 weeks remaining until the competition. The next day, the girl started bringing her carrots, hoping the bribe would help. However, the next day, Marshmallow still refused to eat anything. It just turned its head in discontent. Even on the 11th day, everything was still the same. The horse stubbornly refused to let people approach. And that same day, Lilith, who always arrived at the same time, was a little late. She immediately started apologizing to the horse, explaining that she had been held up in classes. Then she mentioned that at age 7, they forced her to study linear functions, which was quite early for that age. Time passed, and the day of the competition approached. Cheshire was already riding quite well and held firmly in the saddle, as if he had an innate talent. In another training session, he noticed Lilith watching him. She looked very sad, but still cheered on her friend, telling him he was doing great. Suddenly, the girl heard her father's voice, asking why she was sitting there doing nothing. Her father had a knighting ceremony today, but first he came to see his little one. The girl explained to him that she was watching Cheshire progress, and that she was very happy for him. She only regrets that Zephyr still won't come near her. Apparently, it needs more time to heal its injuries. The Duke asked his daughter not to worry, assuring her that the horse would understand soon. She just needed to wait. After this, Lilith wanted to know if her father would go to the Emperor. After all, today is the ceremony. She also wanted to confirm that her father did not obey when the Emperor sent him to war. The tower owner told him that. Then the Duke explained that if monsters attacked, he would have to fight. But the girl wasn't talking about that war, but the one involving invading other territories, and where innocent children are robbed and killed. Lilith hopes Dad will flatly refuse such a thing. Enoch was perplexed. He didn't expect such a question from such a small girl, and she started begging him to promise that he would refuse the Emperor's request to participate in that war. It was terrible for her. Her little face showed so much sadness and pain that the Duke's heart ached. Lilith didn't understand why Dad wasn't answering. Then he reacted and asked her not to worry about it. Upon hearing that, the girl ran to hug him, shedding tears of joy that Dad wouldn't disappoint her. And she assured him that she was fine now, but the Duke didn't understand what she meant. Then she explained that she didn't want Dad to go to war for her, which sounded even stranger to the Duke. But he just hugged his daughter tighter and promised her again not to go to war or obey the Emperor. The next morning, Lilith went to see Zephyr at dawn, because during the day she couldn't since her dad wouldn't be home. The Duke left for the Imperial Palace and will stay there until late at night. He also brought the horse some good medicine, like the one Rico sent, and mixed it with warm water. Soaking a rag in it, Lilith wanted to wrap the horse's leg, so she hoped it was still sleeping. And carefully approaching Zephyr, the girl asked him not to move, assuring him it wouldn't hurt, and she bandaged him. The family doctor said it was very good medicine, but warned that it didn't work on animals. The girl didn't know if this would help now, but decided to try, cursing the damned Damon Martini. Still, she hoped Zephyr would get better, and explained to him again that she wasn't doing this for the competitions. And if the horse doesn't want to run, it's not mandatory. In any case, Cheshire must achieve the victory. As the girl spoke, Zephyr stared intently at her, and its gaze darkened noticeably. The mare remembered how the young count shouted at her to run faster. She had to win. He even told her she was only worth something in competitions, so she was obliged to win. And now, Lilith was telling her that being born only for riding wasn't right. It wasn't fair, but Martini's words, saying he had found another mare because Zephyr was no longer useful, hurt her. Lilith assured her that she didn't need to run to be a truly loved and valued animal. The girl just wished the mare would feel better, that her leg and heart wound would heal. Then her words became slower, and she didn't realize she had fallen asleep, leaning against the mare's soft belly. After a while, Lilith woke up when she heard her grandfather's voice, asking what she was doing there. With her eyes still drowsy, she understood that she had fallen asleep, but she was very surprised to see the old Duke there. Nordic looked at her with a very serious face, and the little one feared he was going to scold her. He shouldn't have seen her there, so she explained that she just came to feed the little horse. Seeing the white beast, Duke Rubinstein was a little surprised that they brought him to the competition, as he had heard rumors that Zephyr wouldn't even let people ride him, much less run. Grandfather suggested choosing another horse, but she refused, explaining that Zephyr's heart was wounded, and if she abandons him here, he will completely shut himself off from people, and she doesn't plan to look for another horse. Then she apologized, admitting that she wouldn't be able to participate or bring prizes to the family. Grandfather was puzzled, as he never asked her to bring prizes, much less when she had never ridden before. Seeing that his granddaughter only became sadder, he bent down beside her and touched her little shoe with his hand. This confused her a little, and Nordic then approached the fence and entered with one of the horses. It was a chestnut horse, quite calm, a steed that the old man took outside. Then he placed the little one on top of him, and he also mounted, to guide the horse. And Lilith started to suspect. They rode around the meadow for a while. Nordic decided to show his granddaughter the sensations of riding. The little one couldn't imagine it would be so cool. Afterwards, they reached a hill from where the entire province could be seen. But then she remembered that her grandfather was supposed to return with Dad the next day. And he explained that the banquet for the nobility was yesterday and the ceremony today, so there was no point in staying there. He would have to spend another half day just watching his son, whom he already trusts. That's why he came back. At that moment, Nordic noticed that his granddaughter was smiling, and she was simply happy that her grandfather looked happy. Lilith believed he was happy because of Dad's return, but the grandfather confessed that without Enoch, he lived much more peacefully. Suddenly, Lilith became sad again, realizing that they hadn't seen each other because of her. And while they lived in Zenon, Dad often felt lonely. Her grandfather didn't understand her words, as Enoch himself messed up. Besides, he left precisely because of him. And the girl worried again that Dad now has to go back to war, even though he doesn't want to kill innocent people. Immediately, Lilith assured her grandfather that she herself was fine and only wanted him to convince his son not to go to war. Still, life doesn't turn out as one wishes. And when a person gains something, they also lose something. Lilith's father never wanted to give up. In his youth, he wanted to eradicate the class system, and Nordic had to stop him. Enoch had to learn to live, suppressing his true self because he was obliged to obey his parents. Now it will be the same. Lilith's father is always forced to renounce his own convictions. He endured all this for his father, and now he endures it for his daughter. But for Lilith, he will make the right decision. Nordic deeply regrets that the little one has to face this, and it pains him that he cannot help. The old man couldn't bear his granddaughter being in danger, and he is sure that her father feels it even more intensely. All that remains is to hope that the world will change someday. Meanwhile, Duke Enoch Rubinstein was in the imperial palace preparing for the ceremony. Walking down the corridor, he ran into a young blonde woman whom he knew very well. A short while before, on the day of the ceremony, Enoch headed to the throne room where the emperor was. His stride was calm, but many thoughts were swirling in his head. Approaching His Majesty, the Duke greeted him with all honors. Nicholas von Pavilion also greeted the great swordsman and his loyal vassal. The emperor was happy to see him after so long, ready to dedicate himself to the empire. Enoch immediately apologized for the trouble he had caused, but Nicholas saw no reason to dwell on past mistakes. But he hopes the Duke will raise his sword for him someday, as befits a true knight. Rubinstein could not argue, and declared that everything would be as his great master ordered. After this, they went to the emperor's study, who asked why Enoch didn't bring his daughter. His Majesty wanted to see the little one, but the Duke remained silent about it, and Nicholas affirmed that he did not doubt Lilith's abilities. For her blood was Rubinstein, and he was incredibly happy that the empire had a new talent willing to give his life. This began to exasperate Enoch, but he restrained himself, and the emperor asked him to approach the large curtain. When he complied with the request, His Majesty pulled back the silky fabric panel that was hanging. Enoch was very impressed by what was hidden behind the fabric. Portraits and paintings hung on the wall, and all the faces were familiar to the Duke. There he was and the captain, and moments where they appeared over covered bodies. Further down, there were portraits of more people, but their faces were unfamiliar to Rubinstein. These people sacrificed themselves for the empire, and the emperor could not give them due recognition. Nicholas asserted that he also suffered, as he sent troops to certain death for the good of the empire. War is simply cruel, and on the battlefield, no one can guarantee the lives of the warriors. Then, His Majesty approached the map on the wall and declared that for the lands and the people, they could not delay. Finally, Enoch decided to express his idea to the emperor, and the latter did not object to listening to him. The Duke simply understood what His Majesty meant, and he already had a prepared answer for that. Nicholas probably was going to ask to send Lilith, but she is very fragile. She even seems easy to hurt. She is so precious that it is simply impossible to stand aside, and these words alarmed the Duke even more. Immediately afterwards, the emperor declared that such a small girl cannot be sent to the battlefield. He wished Lilith a quiet childhood and, deep down, even wanted to help her. And then, in a subdued but more threatening tone, His Majesty told the Duke that he was not the only one. Many parents would scream at such an injustice because no one would want to send their child to war. However, Rubinstein has enough strength to protect his daughter. And if Duke Enoch takes his place, no one will dare to object, and that would mean his sentence. On matters of war they never agreed, but wars were, are, and will be, and the Duke always said that it made no sense to rule a state. However, Nicholas does it for the people. He wants to make the empire stronger, so that no one dares to touch them. It seems he is preparing for an invasion, and His Majesty expected the right decision from Enoch. Nicholas declared that in recent years the empire had changed a lot, but so had the Duke. Now he is not just a vassal of the empire, he is a father raising a small daughter. He believed the best time to start was in winter, when life quiets down, and the smell of blood would be buried under the snow. Without answering anything, Enoch walked past the emperor and headed towards the exit. He didn't stop him, but he knew the Duke well and only shouted after him that he would prepare everything. Shortly after, Rubinstein met the captain, who was waiting for news on how the meeting with the emperor had gone. From the Duke's brief answer, he understood everything, and then reported that someone wished to meet with him. But Enoch didn't want to see anyone at that moment, and then Axion confessed it was Lady Selena. Everything inside him flinched instantly, although he tried to remain calm. And he asked what she wanted. The captain didn't know, but she probably wished to talk about his daughter, especially since she has the right to see her. Enoch found it a bit strange, as he had also heard that Selena had another family. Still, if she wants to see Lilith, he shouldn't prevent her. And there she was in front of him, while the captain silently took his leave of Rubinstein and left. Selena spoke first, recalling that they hadn't seen each other in a long time, and was curious to know how Enoch was doing now. From his answer to her question, the girl understood that he was still as direct as many years ago. Then she apologized and confessed that it was she who reported him to the emperor. This meant nothing to the Duke. Even without her involvement, Nicholas would have found him if necessary. And Selena also confessed that for the report, she had received something in return. They allowed her to resign and released her son from the army. Rubinstein knew this too, but the lady didn't want to end the conversation so soon. And she asked why he had returned, since he could have found a way to escape again. Then she became curious about how he was raising his daughter, and he stated that her name was Lilith. A good and sweet girl. She is just shorter than the other children, but she will grow up very soon. Probably the reason is that she is picky about food. Now Selena understood that her ex-husband had truly changed. She didn't believe it before. Enoch wanted to separate from her as soon as possible and promised to arrange a meeting with his daughter if she wanted to see her. He just hadn't told his daughter about her mother. But then Selena declared that she did not wish to see her. Actually, the lady came to ask the Duke to continue not telling Lilith anything about her. Very soon, the little one will enter the educational center where Selena works, and they will surely cross paths there. Enoch still didn't understand his ex-wife's decision not to see her daughter. It's just that she already has a new family and a son, so Selena cannot be the girl's mother. Her son is already 5 years old and also studies at that educational center now. Therefore, if Lilith sees her and starts saying something strange, it could affect her son's emotional state. Selena apologized again. It's just that when children appear, a person's heart truly changes. Enoch should understand this better than anyone, but for her daughter, the lady is capable of anything. Then she apologized one more time, turned around, and left the way she came. For the Duke, this day was exhausting, especially the talk with his ex, and he was grateful it was over. Upon arriving home, he went straight to see his little one, who wasn't asleep yet and was waiting for her daddy. Then he lay down next to her, while she looked at drawings in a book and decided to tell her something. He didn't know where to start, and the girl asked him not to beat around the bush and say what was on his mind. Then he asked if Lilith wanted to see her mother, something that took her completely by surprise. In fact, she realized that her father had seen her mother, but she asked why so suddenly. It's just that they are in the capital, and it would be normal for the daughter to be interested in her. But the little one wasn't asking. The girl supposed her mother wanted to see her, but the little one wasn't very enthusiastic about the idea. They arrived in the capital, and she knew her mother was around, but she didn't want to see her. It would be awkward. Now the father was worried. Before, the girl asked about her mother, because she learned she had 2 parents. Until now, she only had dad, and it would seem strange to her if mom suddenly appeared. That's why the girl thinks she doesn't have to see her, nor is she very eager to. Enoch didn't insist. Lilith has the right not to see her mother, and even not to know who she is. They decided to end the talk. The girl fell asleep, and the Duke watched her for a while longer. A whirlwind of thoughts returned to his mind, recalling the conversation with his ex-wife. But the girl's wish was more important, and he himself thought that maybe it was better this way. It turns out Lilith was not yet asleep. She was tormented by the doubt that their meeting would be horrible because of her. She suddenly turned and hugged him, so suddenly that the Duke became a little unsettled. But she just declared that she loved Daddy more than anyone in the world, to which Enoch responded in kind. Furthermore, the girl confessed that she only needed him, that she just wanted them to live happily together. Later, Lilith received a message from Rico, who told her that the person who needed the antidote was better now. Of course, the girl worried about her younger sister, but she didn't think he would actually respond. Rico also indicated that the mail is at Duke Volterac's castle. He is now penniless and with a broken arm, but he can be found in the gambling house near the castle. Enrico also gave the little one a small piece of advice. If she is going to give this information to her father, it is best that she address Yeti. Finally, he wished her luck in the kidnapping competitions and congratulated her father in advance. Lilith immediately handed the letter to Jetty, only asking her to cut out the last sentence. The rest had to be burned, which the maid did immediately. Then, they prepared to write to the Duke, and Lilith thought about how to start in the best way. The greeting sounded quite insolent and arrogant, as if written by some hooligan. Jetty doubted if it was the correct way to write it, but Lilith assured that it was perfect like that. When the letter was finished, the little one loved it, especially because the maid knew how to write in different letters. Lilith began to put the sheet into an envelope, and Yeti asked permission to ask her something. She inquired who the lady really was, suspecting she was living a second life. Bay thought the letter was more important, and terrible conjectures came to mind which Lilith confirmed. But she asked the maid to remember the golden rule of the Red Falcon #1. She replied that for the information she should give something equivalent, but Yeti couldn't give anything like that. Therefore, she understood that she could not ask about the true essence of the young lady. Meanwhile, in the training ground of the Duke Rubinstein's residence, the practice continued. Enoch watched the night's exercise, but his daughter's words didn't leave his head, about how she only needed him, and that she simply wanted to live happily by his side, just the two of them. Until now, the little one has lived without a mother, and he thought it would be enough if he did well. But since he is not her only parent, as she grows up, he will have to give her even more, because she is a girl. Then, his attention was caught by Cheshire, who was standing to one side with a wooden sword, looking at the ground. By his silent movement, it seemed like he was chewing something, and Enoch started asking him if everything was all right. The boy stated that he was not well and started putting his hand in his mouth, which greatly frightened the Duke. He couldn't understand what Cheshire was doing, who even paled a little, and was about to stop him. But he was already pulling his hand out, and it seemed he had pulled something out of his mouth. The boy immediately threw it onto the floor, and the Duke, alarmed, saw that it was just a milk tooth. But he reacted suddenly, as if he just realized that the little one hadn't lost all his milk teeth yet. Enoch was reminded of his daughter's first milk tooth, and realized that Lilith would soon start losing hers too. Afterwards, Cheshire confessed that he always pulled out his milk teeth that way. Besides, he wasn't afraid, and the Duke congratulated him on his bravery. Then he asked him when the first one had fallen out. At age 6, the lower incisor fell out, and now almost all of them have fallen out. Except for the molars. The Duke seemed to calm down a bit, but then realized that the first one was at age 6. His daughter is almost 7 now, and then he headed to the library, hoping books could help him. Enoch worried that Lilith still hadn't lost her milk teeth by then. There are even some that have just come in. Her physical development was slow for some reason, and the Duke began to think about the possible cause. He did not breastfeed her, nor did he introduce solid food until after 5 months. The cause could also be poor nutrition while living in the village. This distressed the poor father so much that, not knowing what to do, he started banging his head against the table. He leaned towards the idea that the porridge was too liquid. At that moment, the butler entered and was surprised to find his master in that state. The Duke startled, because Rem entered very quietly and suggested he signal for help. But he stated that he had been calling out a lot, that he almost broke the door, and realized that his master was lost in thought. At the same time, he understood the Duke's worry and asked him to leave that to the specially trained maids. It was better for the young master to attend to his duties, and Rem placed a box on the table. In it were the matters that needed to be resolved today, and the butler took the books with him. Enoch rummaged through the box, but still shocked, he didn't even know where to start. He barely has time for the child, and he doesn't understand why he is doing this. His gaze wandered a bit towards the ceiling. Then he looked back at the box, and there he saw a letter. The envelope had the seal of the person who reported Cheshire's whereabouts, and was recent. It said that the Duke's renunciation of his convictions is not the only way to protect himself. The author of the letter did not understand why Enoch continued to yield to the cunning of the red serpent. That is not the future that Rubinstein desired. He needs to grow. Indeed, since childhood, he dreamed of another world. So this country must change. And it will. It kept saying that only Enoch can achieve it. And for that, he needs to find Joseph Lutman. That man is from the Volterac estate in the north, and can be found in a brazen gambling house. The author assured that this was the first step towards a great revolution. Then the Duke threw the letter onto the table, without understanding its meaning. He had received a similar letter before. He pulled it out of the drawer and noticed that the handwriting was different. It seems this anonymous writer hides his identity, but it's not clear who would benefit from it. Enoch immediately hid both letters in the desk drawer, looking around to see if anyone was spying on him. This is a clear incitement to rebellion. If someone sees this, there will be serious trouble. The Duke thought that the person who wrote this must be crazy. Something like that is impossible. The imperial court was the symbol of omnipotent power, a power granted by the supreme deity, the first. From generation to generation, this strength was only allowed to the Pavilion imperial family. And naturally, the empire proclaimed divine rule. The emperor himself claimed that his absolute power was a gift from the gods, and opposing him was not an easy task, because his powers are almost divine. And I don't know what lunatic dared to incite rebellion. Someone is spying on the Duke, and he doesn't understand why they are writing these things about him specifically. As a child, he dreamed of beheading the emperor, but these were childish fantasies. The reason for that desire was that Enoch was aware of his own power. The emperor could brainwash people with powers whenever he pleased. He is the only one with exceptional level abilities who cannot be controlled. When Enoch fantasized about that as a child, he didn't understand anything, truth be told. A revolution is not made with strength alone. You need a convincing reason. The Duke did not have that reason. And besides, a revolution needs the support of the elite. But most nobles benefit from this class system and are happy with the emperor. Enoch, turning it over and taking out the letter again, became a bundle of nerves. He almost tore his hair out. Someone says they don't understand anything, and on top of that incites revolution. In a fit of nerves, the Duke crumpled the letter and wished that guy would stop hiding and tell him to his face. Meanwhile, Lilith was strolling, pondering whether her father had read the letter yet. She was chatting with Cheshire, but it seemed to her that he paid her no mind and was only interested in the horse. The boy assured her that he had heard everything, and even repeated that she had talked about her mother, and that he was worried about her father always being alone. The girl was surprised, because Cheshire had barely looked at her, but it was true that he had heard everything. She became curious to know if Lilith was fine without her mother, because if so, there was nothing to worry about. Uncle Enoch will decide for himself. He could meet someone, fall in love, and get married. In reality, a concern arose for Lilith, right after the topic of her mother came up. That would mean she is the love interest of the protagonists, in a reality where they continue living after the end. But in the original work, there is no romance, not even a hint. It is a bloody, revolutionary novel. The author, when creating Enoch and Cheshire, did not add a shred of love, only a lot of revenge. Injustice and rebellions. Inevitably, the idea imposed itself that, in that case, Cheshire would not need to get married at all. The girl found it strange and asked her friend if he needed a family. He thought she was trying to start a conversation so that he would become the Duke's son, and he asked her not to start. But Lilith didn't mean that, but the family that would be created by his own will. His own family. She asked him to imagine that he met someone and fell in love and then got married. After that, they would live for a while and then have children. But Cheshire still didn't understand her reasoning. The girl just asked him to close his eyes and imagine how all this could happen. He must imagine waking up in the morning, with the aroma of delicious food flooding his home. And his beautiful wife calls him from the kitchen, asking him to change their adorable son's diaper. Then Cheshire enters the baby's room, and there his lovely son smiles at him, so much like him and his wife. He changes the diaper. Then he gives the baby the bottle, and the baby looks at him and smiles. The baby is so adorable that you want to hug him and sing to him. And then his wife approaches him. His wife hugs him tenderly and tells him how much she loves him, while he holds his son in his arms. Afterwards, his wife invites him to go on a picnic, because the weather that day is simply wonderful. They arrived at a clearing where the sun shone and the birds sang, with a murmuring stream nearby. And his son, sitting in Cheshire's arms, occasionally calls him Dad. His wife sighs happily at the scent of the flowers growing in the clearing, and then turns to him. Once again, she tells him how much she loves him and how happy she is with him, and that she wishes to live like this as a family forever. Cheshire opened his eyes at that moment and noticed that Lilith also seemed to be imagining all that. Then she explained that this was the kind of family she meant, and that she was interested in knowing his opinion on it. For a few seconds the boy thought about it. Such a development of events seemed quite good to him. Still, it felt a little unsettling to think about it. Although if it happened, it should be pleasant. And Lilith, at that moment, hoped that the author would see how, without sparing tears or strength, she instilled love in the protagonist. The girl took her friend's hands, and as if reciting a prayer, asked him to love in this world. Cheshire didn't know what to answer at that moment, but in Lilith's eyes, he saw that she sincerely desired that. Then, leaving him a moment to reflect, the girl went to the basket of carrots, and kept saying that writing, studying, and fencing are also very important. But she believes that love is vital, and those who ignore its beauty are wretched. That's why she insists to her friend that he should love, because this brings happiness and pleasure. Seeing that the young lady would not give in, Cheshire agreed. Besides, he also saw something good in it. Lilith was so happy that she didn't notice that Zephyr had started eating carrots from her hand. But then she understood, and she wasn't the only one surprised. Cheshire didn't believe it either. And the little animal was there, with a satisfied face devouring the vegetable. Lilith exclaimed immediately, "Did your friend see that?" She herself couldn't believe it, but it was real. And then Cheshire approached the horse and opened the small door. Lilith didn't understand why he did it, and he asked her to try stroking the horse. Everything trembled inside the girl. It was a very exciting moment. She couldn't decide, but then she reached out her hand and touched Sephirka's nose, who remained very calm. Meanwhile, Cheshire placed the saddle on her, offering his friend a chance to try riding. Recalling her short stature, the girl understood she wouldn't be able to, and then the boy offered his knee. Lilith still hesitated. The mare might throw her off, although there was hope, and Cheshire hurried her. So she started climbing onto his knee, grabbing his shoulder, and tried to reach the saddle. With great difficulty, she placed her small body in the saddle. Sephirka remained very calm. The girl couldn't believe this miracle. Finally, this animal trusted her and approached. Cheshire began giving her advice on holding on tight and not hunching over, and he himself took the reins. The mare took a few steps and Lilith, filled with joy, hugged her neck. This also pleased Cheshire, and he congratulated his friend for succeeding in making Sephirka trust her. The girl was so happy at that moment that not even the most delicious dessert had made her this happy. The next day, the equestrian competition was going to start, and it would be held on Sarder Hill. Many people had already gathered. The participants were ready. When Lilith appeared next to Sephirka, counting her, there were only 7 participants, but they say that when the winner is obvious, almost no one signs up. Lilith didn't understand what was so special about that Damon Martini, because a huge crowd had come. When the Duke approached, his daughter asked him not to worry, that she wouldn't fall from the saddle because she had a sticking spell. Everything happening here will be in the newspapers, and the girl worried that her father would look like a madman. Still, she rode Sephirka and trained for 5 hours, but that didn't reassure the Duke, and he couldn't help but worry. Then, the daughter reminded him that she wasn't planning to win, especially since she hadn't trained on the obstacle course. She just wanted to take a quiet ride on Sephirka because she adores that mare. Enoch understood his daughter's admiration. He too hadn't seen a horse as beautiful as Sephir. Then Lilith noticed Cheshire, who was ready for the competition on his black steed. The girl also liked how her friend had dressed up. Now he looked like a real heartthrob. The boy was worried whether Lilith would manage it, but she assured him that everything would go as planned. Besides, she promised Sephir that she wouldn't compete, and if there was an obstacle, they would simply avoid it. Winking, Lilith declared that she was leaving the victory to Cheshire, and that she was only there for fun. At that moment, everyone turned to look in the same direction, because the main contender for victory appeared. Lilith and Cheshire also turned their heads there, and several expletives crossed the girl's mind. Damon Martini walked with pride, smiling at all the spectators, as if instilling his victory in them in advance. But then his gaze fell on Lilith, who was next to the white beauty, and his expression changed instantly. Moreover, the boy became furious, not understanding why she was participating right with Sephirka. Then he saw another participant next to the black horse, and the crowd marveled at its beauty. Damon became enraged, as he should have been the center of attention, but it seems today he would be in the shadows. Seeing the Duke, the boy greeted him politely. Then he introduced himself as the son of Count Martini. Enoch wished him luck, and he was surprised that Lilith was also participating. And with a beautiful horse, the girl greeted him proudly, and with some sarcasm, explained that her little horse was called Sephirka. Damon recognized his former horse, but didn't understand why the Duke's daughter had it. Lilith explained that she felt sorry for Sephirka. She was injured, and she rescued her, adding that the previous owner returned her to the stable due to her injury. Furthermore, she lied saying she didn't know who the former owner was, but considered him a horrible being. He sent her to the slaughterhouse. All the nearby spectators applauded the girl, which further infuriated Demon. Knowing she humiliated that scoundrel, Lilith proudly hugged the mare. It seemed Sephirka herself understood everything. She even liked that this miserable person was belittled this way. After this, Lilith looked at the map once more and asked Sephirka to simply stroll and admire the scenery. She pointed out a place on the route from where the lake was visible. There they could stop so the mare could drink water. But the main thing is that Lilith did her job. Now Damon is considered an idiot, and victory definitely belongs to Cheshire. Shortly after, the presenter with a megaphone asked all participants to approach the starting line. At the start of each route, there are judges whom one can approach if someone wants to quit the race. All the children got ready and were asked to start at the signal. Lilith kept believing that Cheshire would rub his victory in that Martini's face. She would even be amused to see it. Then, the presenter prepared the starting pistol, and after asking everyone to get ready, he pulled the trigger. At the instant of the shot, the riders spurred their horses and they rushed onto the track. But in the first few seconds, Sephirka distanced herself from everyone at such a speed that Lilith clung to the side of the saddle. If it weren't for the anti-fall spell, she would have fallen off ages ago. And now she was just screaming in fear and amazement. At one point, she even let go of the reins, not understanding what was happening. But Sephirka kept running along the marked path, although the little one had asked her just to stroll. Glancing cautiously behind her, the girl noticed that the others were no longer visible. Moreover, at this speed, she started feeling a little dizzy and grabbing the reins again. She prepared to die. The horse seemed to understand the state of its rider and immediately stopped abruptly. Then Lilith understood that Sephirka had slowed down. This was nothing more than mutual understanding. Lilith apologized immediately. She didn't know the horse liked speed, and it was she who needed to train more. The girl found it hard to hold the reins, and she felt she didn't deserve a horse like Zephyr. At that instant, a shadow passed by her, and Lilith understood that it was Cheshire's horse. Then she also saw his face, which turned as he looked at his friend over his shoulder. The girl only shouted at him to keep going, assuring him that he would surely succeed. Soon they reached Route B, where the obstacles began, and Lilith became a little uneasy. But before she could think she lacked training, Zephyr, after accelerating, agilely jumped the barrier. It seems this horse knows all the routes by heart, and Lilith only has to keep holding the reins. At the same time, she understood that the horse had undergone terrible training for its body to remember everything like this. For a while they rode through the green meadow, and in the distance, Lilith saw a lake shining. But then she heard someone demanding the horse increase its speed, and it was the voice of Damon Martini. The boy wasn't just talking to the horse, he was mercilessly insulting it, shouting that it wasn't galloping. It was just playing. Damon shouted at the steed that it was crawling on a section without obstacles, and Lilith did not like this at all. Looking around to make sure no one saw her, she shouted that he was far from being an aristocrat and that his mouth stank. Then, she bombarded him with insults she remembered from her past life, some that even Damon himself hadn't heard before. The girl continued saying that he had not an ounce of talent, and that last year, he only won thanks to Zephyr. Lilith advised him to forget about first place, and Damon's face twisted in fury and rage. Catching up to the Duke's daughter, he tried to threaten her, but she knew very well that he couldn't do anything to her. He told her that a rookie would overtake him anyway, not knowing that this was exactly what she had planned. Lilith simply silenced him again and rode faster, kicking dust with Zephyr's hooves. Now it was Demon who was insulting the girl with all sorts of obscenities and spurring the horse with all his might. He tried to catch up to her. He didn't just want to overtake her, Now it was a matter of principle. The boy reached out his hand towards her, trying to grab her to throw her from the saddle to the ground. He used some kind of magic, and the spell that kept her in the saddle stopped working. At that instant, Lilith felt real panic. She could end up mashed on the track. She didn't know how smart Sephrika was, who immediately stopped dead. By the law of physics, the girl flew out of the seat, and her entire life, including her past one, marched before her eyes. But she felt her fall slow down, and she couldn't believe this was real. The horses moved on, while Lilith landed on the path. Although it hurt a little, she was more worried about how this could have happened, and she was furious that Damon had broken the rules so openly. Even if he was furious, breaking the rules is grounds for disqualification and also a ticking time bomb between families. Filled with rage, Lilith decided to run to tell the judges everything. Martini can say goodbye to victory. She had barely taken a few steps when the girl heard the galloping of hooves and, turning, saw Zephyr next to her. She was happy the mayor had returned and suggested they go together to the judges to complain about that idiot. They would surely believe her, because only the two of them were on the track, and she doesn't know how to undo the sticking spell. While the little one was thinking about this, Zephyr moved closer and buried its muzzle in her hair. The girl understood that it was suggesting she continue the race. The mare even grabbed her jacket with its teeth. But now the anti-fall spell was deactivated, and Lilith was very scared. Then she saw in Zephyr's eyes a burning desire to win and was dumbfounded. She thought that, after the hard training and blows, the mare would never want to run again. But it seems Zephyr is determined to run. Lilith agreed, and the mare returned her to the saddle. The girl prepared to ride further and see what would come of all this. Holding tight to the reins, Lilith promised not to let go so as not to fall. The next instant, without any command, Zephyr shot forward again. They rushed down the track, cutting through the air. Sometimes Lilith felt like they were running faster than before. Now this resembled a real gallop. But now the little one was starting to like it. Besides, if she always depended on magic, she wouldn't learn anything. Very soon they caught up to Demon, who was in front of an obstacle and was scolding the horse, which didn't want to jump. Seeing the wretch whipping the horse, Lilith understood that she too would go on strike with such a master. Then Zephyr trotted up to the same barrier. But just before it, for some reason, it stopped. The girl didn't understand why the mare did that, but instantly understood. It was her chance to throw another barb at that scoundrel, and she remembered all the hurtful words. First, Lilith turned to Damon and narrowed her eyes at him as if she were going to puree him, while smiling and stating that he had deflated, and that, even cheating, he wouldn't win even by a joke. Martini's face instantly turned not just red, but purple with rage, and Zephyr jumped the barrier and galloped ahead, hearing the cheerful praise of its rider. Lilith herself was very happy to have another wonderful and intelligent friend. Now only the last straight stretch remained to cover, and as Lilith sank into her thoughts, she didn't realize how they reached the finish line. But what mattered most to her was where Cheshire had gotten to, as he had pulled ahead a while ago. Then she saw him. He was in front of the ribbon inches away, as if waiting for something. Lilith's mare kept approaching the ribbon, and the girl tried to figure it all out. Probably, Cheshire decided to give the first place to his companion. Lilith was convinced when Zephyr broke the ribbon with her chest, and the winner was announced. Applause erupted for young Rubinstein's victory, but she was not happy. It wasn't what she wanted. Now she was sure that Cheshire was only waiting for her to cross the finish line first. At that moment, a magician approached to remove the anti-fall spell. Upon touching her, the man was confused as he felt no magic on her. As the girl got off the horse, the presenters noticed she was slightly injured. They immediately attacked the magician with questions. Why didn't the spell work? The girl could have been badly hurt. He himself had no idea why it happened, and the terrified father was already running towards Lilith. Rushing towards the little one, he demanded explanations of what was happening. But above all, if his daughter was all right. Upon understanding that she had indeed fallen, he wanted to know how it happened and why the spell broke. Lilith didn't get to answer when Enoch and Nordic looked furiously at the sorcerer, as if to tear his head off. Then Lilith declared that the spell was fine, but it broke during the process. The girl told everything, how they were on the track along with young Martini, and he, suddenly, broke the spell on her saddle. That's why she fell, but assured that it barely hurt. Just at that moment, Damon arrived and heard her words, knowing that now he was finished. One of the judges immediately shouted that it was an infraction, but someone thought the boy acted impulsively. Damon himself had already dismounted, and he felt his whole body trembling from the tension. The judges and relatives rushed at him, and Lilith was glad that he finally got nervous. She told her father that she still didn't hold onto the horse well without magic, which is why she fell and got hurt, and her grandfather, meanwhile, was furiously grumbling that he wouldn't let this go for anything in the world. Understanding the old duke's intentions, the girl caught up to him and assured him that she was fine. It just hurts a little, but nothing serious. Besides, she understands how young Mr. Martini felt. Everyone was looking only at him, and he wanted to win. It sounded as if Lilith was about to forgive him, and in fact, Lilith asked them not to punish him, saying that he didn't even realize he violated the rules. The people around started shouting that Rubinstein is the virtue of the aristocracy, but they doubted whether she would forgive something like that. Lilith, meanwhile, thought that she had already won and now needed to make the most of it. Not only will she get the winner's trophy, but it will also affect and improve the family's reputation. And the image of a generous and noble aristocrat will stay with her, something she didn't even imagine. Then, the girl approached Damon and extended her hand to him, declaring that the competition had gone well. The boy looked at that hand as if he were asked to touch red-hot coal, and his hatred was still reflected on his face. Then he flinched, as if about to flee, and people thought he was furious about having the trophy taken away. Overcoming his emotions, Damon finally extended his hand in response, and Lilith asked him to compete honestly next time. In a low voice, the boy apologized to her as she extended her arms, clearly ready to hug him. Indeed, she hugged him, and people began to shout that an heiress like Lilith Rubinstein was an example to follow. In reality, Lilith hugged him to ask him in a whisper if he was very upset about the defeat. Soon an article appeared in the newspapers, saying that the capital now had the youngest winner of the spring tournament. They even decided to make a portrait of her and Cheshire, standing with the horses, and the boy advised her on how to hold the reins correctly. The artist loved the pose they were in next to the horses. The emperor himself ordered the portrait, an enormous honor, and Lilith suggested holding hands. The boy blushed a little, but took the little one's hand, and she felt his warmth. Moreover, the day also turned out to be quite warm because the real spring had begun. A copy of the portrait was also installed in the Duke's mansion as a special artifact. Leo even felt a little envious. He also won the home tournament, but nobody painted his portrait. Theo just asked his brother not to compare himself to Lilith. They carried boxes in their hands and showed them to Cheshire. The boys explained that Princess Lara's dress with the tiara was there, and it would be a great gift for Lilith's birthday. It will be in 3 days, and Leo even made sure the dress was adorned with precious stones. The tiara was also custom-made with real diamonds, because everything sold was counterfeit. The boys decided to keep the gifts a secret until the party, and hurried to hide them. But Cheshire stayed there, thinking about his friend's upcoming celebration. He realized he hadn't prepared anything for her, and went to check how much money he had. The boy received 1 silver coin for his expenses, and now had 4. It should be enough for a doll, but the girl already has plenty. Cheshire wanted to give Lilith something she really desired, but hesitated if he had enough money. The twins prepared a gorgeous collection from Princess Laura, which costs quite a bit, but it was just a dress and a tiara. And Cheshire started thinking about what else was in the collection. It could be a magic wand, but the boy didn't believe the princess had anything like that. He became very sad about not being able to choose a good gift for his friend and went to the slum district. He checked about 20 stalls and found an adorable bunny-shaped coin purse. Even the cheapest magic wand costs 10 coins, and that one has fake stones. But Cheshire wanted to give Lilith something valuable, so he decided to look for extra work. Then he saw a lottery where the prize was a magic wand and a magic sword, and it wasn't expensive. He had enough money for 60 attempts, and he decided to try his luck, clinging to hope. Approaching the counter, Cheshire, brimming with confidence, asked for a ticket first. Meanwhile, Captain Axion thought that even though they had caught the child kidnappers, he had no peace. At that instant, he heard a boy buying another lottery ticket, which also turned out to be empty. By then, Cheshire only had 1 attempt left, which the seller was quick to remind him of. The captain observed the boy and realized that he was the child the Duke had brought with him. Axion himself didn't understand it. He knew it would be difficult for Enoch with the girl, and now him too. Although the young Duke was always seen as strange, Cheshire despaired when drawing another empty ticket. The seller pretended to feel sorry for the boy, thinking he just had bad luck. Disappointed at being left with nothing, Cheshire bowed his head and decided to go home. After a few steps, He almost collided with a tall gentleman with black hair, whom he recognized immediately. The seller, upon seeing the captain, trembled, but he still greeted him with blessings. Axion only asked what the boy was doing there, as it was very dangerous for a child to wander alone. But Cheshire affirmed he was fine, and thanking him for the concern, he prepared to move on. The captain watched him leave and knew from his appearance that something had happened to that child. He immediately grabbed his arm and asked Cheshire to wait, but he himself stopped. The boy stared at him, not understanding what this man wanted from him, and the captain was trying to understand why he had done it. That child was no one to him. After looking at the shop window, Axion realized he needed that thing, which he never got. At first, the captain thought Enoch didn't buy him toys, but the boy assured him that wasn't it. But Axion didn't believe it. He thought the stupid Duke only spent on his daughter and deprived this child. So he dragged Cheshire back to the counter and began asking if that was the thing he wanted. The seller then explained that it was the magic sword of the hero Lewis, but the boy simply moved aside. Axion was bewildered. He couldn't understand what he really needed, so he spent all the money. And very softly, Cheshire confessed that he needed Princess Laura's magic wand. The captain had never heard a stranger explanation. He decided this boy had strange tastes. The seller nodded instantly. He also didn't believe the boy would spend everything for the wand, but explained that the pacifiers kept falling out. And he even felt awkward with the customer. Cheshire, dejected, didn't want to stay and prepared to leave, but the captain stopped him. Then he placed a gold coin on the counter, which almost made the seller fall out of his apron. Axion threw that coin to the boy, who caught it immediately, and the captain asked him not to think about anything, and to buy lottery tickets with all that money. Soon, Lilith received a notice of admission to the Empire's training center for gifted children. But there was a note. If the addressee did not appear by the indicated deadline, it would be considered a violation of military law. With a heavy sigh, the Duke understood that Cheshire would also receive something like this, since he had asked for them to be registered on the same day. But then he suggested to his daughter to postpone it for 1 or 2 years, as mandatory recruitment is only from the age of 9. Lilith surprised everyone by objecting and announcing that she herself wanted to go. She wanted to use her skills as soon as possible, or she wouldn't grow up in 1 or 2 years. The girl begged her father not to worry, assuring him that she could handle everything. In reality, the little one's problem was not at all that spell. Several days had already passed since the Duke received the letter, but there was no response. Lilith couldn't believe her father was ignoring it. She wrote to awaken the revolutionary spirit. Perhaps for his daughter, he decided to become the emperor's dog just so she would be fine. This scared the girl, but she trusted her father. He was the only one who could lead the revolution. Suddenly, Enoch confessed to the little one that he had to leave. He was going to find her birthday present, but he would have to travel very far. He planned to go to the central region, passing through the temple. Here Lilith understood that most likely he was going to meet Joseph Lutman, so he didn't ignore the letter. Then, the father confessed that he wouldn't manage it in 1 day, but he promised to return for the birthday itself. Only 3 days were left until the party, and Lilith got worried. Would her father have time to find the gentleman? In the original story, Joseph was already on the Duke's side from the beginning. He was his advisor. In the book it was written that Enoch had to suffer for 3 months to bring him along. And for Enoch to be able to find him in 3 days, Lilith started begging him to take her with him. Because she knows that gentleman, she explained that her motive was that she herself wanted to choose a gift, and her dad confessed that he also had to visit a friend there. Lilith didn't give up, feigning surprise when she learned that her dad also had friends. And to make sure, she started shouting that he should take her with him because she didn't want to stay alone without her dad. Besides, she would soon have to go to the training center, and the girl feared never seeing her father again. In the end, Lilith managed to convince him and, disguised as James Brown, went with her to the Baltarac alley. The girl was very happy that they came together, but the place was so gloomy that children were not recommended to go there. Only now did Enoch put his hands on his head, realizing he had gone mad by giving in to his daughter's pleas and bringing her to this place. Everything around smelled of tobacco smoke, and the Duke used a little magic so that this smoke would not harm his little daughter. Lilith, meanwhile, mainly reflected on why her father needed a whole 3 months to convince Joseph. Perhaps that man was too inaccessible, but that was not an obstacle for the Duke with his talents. Approaching a building, Enoch asked if Joseph Lutman was among the visitors. 2 men standing at the door, as if guarding it, only exchanged glances with each other. In the end, the Duke and his daughter were simply kicked out of there, and now Lilith understood why it took 3 months. The good Duke was in such a place for the first time, and the circumstances did not allow him to see Joseph immediately. Lilith even suggested he take off the disguise and confess that he was the Duke, something Enoch completely agreed with. However, he had a reason to first transform into James and thus meet his supposed friend. Enoch thought that if that friend found out who he really was, he wouldn't be happy, and it would be difficult to talk to him. Rubinstein began to think of a way that could help in this peculiar situation. It was then that Lilith remembered that there was a casino where the doors were always open to gamblers. With a grin from ear to ear, Lilith asked if her daddy knew how to play poker. It seems a very fun day awaits them.